split up and chase. After tea time, the monks in the stone chamber were cleaned up. Morong Chantian looked at the 8 Chatong, said, and then entered one of them alone. Like in the stone chamber, a layer of Huafan stone slab is also paved in the Chatong, which extends to the front. More than a mile ahead, groups of Tufu monks are gathered, one by one armed with weapons, and some people are digging hard at the stone wall. In this case, Morong Chantian naturally knew that the road in front must be blocked. These people couldn't pass through, but they didn't dare to go back to the stone chamber, so he wanted to dig another channel to leave. Is it so easy for a group of ordinary people who have lost their mana to dig caves on hard rocks? Morong Chantian sneered and walked forward step by step with a sword. Those people retreated tremblingly. Morong Chantian took a step forward and those people took a step back. Finally, at a certain moment, a terrible cry came from the back of the crowd, and the other party's step back stopped abruptly. Lord Morong, spare us. We know we are wrong and we are willing to compensate. Someone spoke and begged softly. No mercy. Morong Chantian ignored her, and she shouted. Approaching step by step, the flying sword in his hand is obliquely held in his hand, the sword tip is facing down, and the bright red sword body is dripping with blood. It's too late. If you just came to the spirit realm of Rose and you reported a friendly attitude, the people of Shueiyue sect would be happy to make friends with you. However, your hands are covered with the blood of Shueiyue sect disciples. If you were spared, how could you live up to the grievances of Shueiyue sect? Morong Chantian's voice became colder and colder. At one moment, someone in the opposite crowd suddenly raised his axe and ran towards Morong Chantian. Seek death. Morong Chantian snorted coldly and a sword came out. The man was cut off by his waist and fell on the Huafan stone slab with a plop. Bang! The axe fell on the Huafan stone harder than steel and made a dull sound. The axe bumped a few times and became silent. This kind of Huafan stone combined with other natural materials and earth treasures is extremely heavy. For these monks who have lost their magic power, no matter how many people want to move it with the physical strength of ordinary people, they don't want to think about it. Therefore, this stone plate is like the sickle of death. Knowing that it will kill itself, there is nothing to do but watch it close its own mana. As soon as the man died, there was a commotion in the crowd, and the people in front crowded behind in an attempt to escape the disaster in this way. However, all this is in vain. One sword. One sword. Another sword. Every sword will reap a life. Spell. Finally, some people rushed over with weapons. But it was still futile. Morong Chantian's sword turned into a light, and all the people fell into a pool of blood. Boom! The crowd was crazy and rushed in the opposite direction of Morong Chantian. However, just like the use of refueling tactics, no matter how many people rushed past, they all fell on the way. The bodies in the cave piled up higher and higher, and even blocked the way. Morong Chantian's distance from the crowd is getting shorter and shorter. The sword is shining, screaming and bloody. At one moment, Morong Chantian stopped with a sword and looked across from the high-piled bodies. Behind the piles of corpses, she saw a martial spirit puppet standing there. Because of the shelter of the corpse, only the part above the bright red shoulder was exposed. The one who intercepted so many friars was just a martial spirit puppet. After feeling silently, all the people here had died and no one was alive. Morong Chantian hugged the martial spirit puppet to show his gratitude. Although she knew that the Wuhuan puppet was just a magic weapon and an emotionless killing machine. She might not understand her gratitude, she still hugged her fist. After a salute, Morong Chantian turned and walked towards the stone chamber. However, she didn't know that when he turned and left, the martial spirit puppet stared at his back and hugged him. In the stone chamber, the other 13 elders of Shueiyue sect came back earlier than Morong Chantian, and released the disciples of Shueiyue sect and began to clean the battlefield. Seeing Morong Chantian coming back, many disciples of Shueiyue sect saluted her and went into the cave to finish her. Master! There should be more than 3,000 Tufu Palace disciples here. Where are the other 3 stone chambers? The total number of Tufu Palace disciples should exceed 10,000. In the original passage, Morong Chantian saw Yi Tian. The friars of the 3 stone chambers already know what happened here. They have tried to get out through 6 channel exits and channel entrances, but none of them can escape with the previous arrangement. But I regret to tell you that many of them have died at the hands of puppets, and there are few enemies left for your family to avenge. Tian said calmly. The dead are gone. Even if they are enemies, they can't be raised. As long as they can comfort the dead, it doesn't matter who killed them. Morong Qianqian said sadly. She wanted those dead Shueiyue sect to see the scene of revenge here, but no one could do it. Master, continue to kill. Then get out of here. After a little meditation, Morong Qianqian said. Well. Come with me. Old 17, if you take back the Huafan stone here, don't follow me. Yi Tian said. Morong Qianqian and others surprisingly found that Yi Tian's body lit up again. Then the master's figure disappeared from the stone wall. Morong Qianqian and 13 elders of Shueiyue sect moved quickly and flashed into the halo. They were stunned to find that they were in the mountains and rocks instead of crossing the stone wall into other bifurcated caves. When they were surprised, Yi Tian gently floated and asked the people to follow. With their knowledge, these friars in the realm of God naturally know that they can fly away in the big stones because of this halo. Therefore, they closely follow Yi Tian's body and dare not lag behind at all. Yi Tian's speed is very stable. The 5 elements of Pearly Halo is 2 feet long, which is more than enough to accommodate more than a dozen people. After flying hundreds of feet away from the boulder, they only felt that the scenery in front of them had changed and finally came to a fork in the road. Yi Tian pointed to a stone room at the end of the fork. There are more than 30 people coming, 2 friars in Huashan territory, and the rest are friars in Yuanying Jindan territory. Master, then you don't have to be so troublesome. You always feel unhappy when you avenge without resistance. Morong Qianqian said to Yi Tian with a fist, waved his hand fiercely and went towards the stone chamber. The 13 elders of Huashanjing behind him were also unwilling to fall behind and just followed. Yi Tian doesn't worry about anything. If more than a dozen monks in Huashan realm can't deal with such a weak enemy, they really need to be honed. He walked slowly towards the stone chamber, but his line of sight was under the light of Yuan Tianyan, observing the situation in the stone chamber. More than 30 friars of Tufu sect were vulnerable to the fierce Water Moon Division friars. 2 friars of Huashan realm, one died at the hands of Morong Qianqian and the other died at the hands of the old woman. In all, it took only dozens of interest, and the battle was over. This time, the number of the other party was small, and the elders did not release their disciples. They quickly cleaned the battlefield. Morong Qianqian looked at Yi Tian. Master, go to another place. Yi Tian's palm gently said, don't be so troublesome. Someone is coming here. There are 70 or 80 people. The highest cultivation is Yuanying territory. There is no Huashan territory. Let's solve it here. Everything follows the master's arrangement. Morong Qianqian nodded slightly and waited in the stone chamber with other elders. It didn't take long. As Yi Tian said, there was a rapid sound of clothes flying in a fork hole. Then dozens of people rushed into the stone chamber and frantically chopped at Morong Qianqian. These people came to fight because they had found someone in the stone chamber. Morong Qianqian and others, who were already ready, used their own means, waved sword lights one after another, and continued to reap the lives of their enemies. However, there were too many people rushing in, but 3 of them, regardless of the crazy attack of others, used their magic weapons and went straight to Yi Tian. Suddenly, all 3 of them were the accomplishments of Yuanying territory. Die! Yi Tianling snorted, and the fierce soldier's flying sword appeared in his hand in a flash, almost simultaneously using a dazzling dark golden sword light. As if the sun were rising. When the golden light fell, all the 3 friars in Huashan territory turned into broken meat. The power of this sword not only cut the flesh of the 3 friars in Yuanying territory, but also their Yuanying. Seeing the scene, Morong Qianqian and others were shocked. Their swords danced. In a moment, they had killed all the Tufu disciples who rushed into the stone chamber. The dust has settled. There was no living Tufu disciple in the stone chamber. Morong Qianqian and the 13 elders of Huashanjing didn't continue to clean the battlefield for the first time to obtain booty, but stood in place together, turned to Yi Tian, and looked at Yi Tian with bright eyes, looking very quiet. What's the problem? Yi Tian saw the shock in everyone's eyes, motioned, put away the fierce soldier's flying sword and asked with a smile. Morong Chanqian stepped forward and said in a difficult voice, Master, what are your accomplishments? My accomplishments? Can't you see my accomplishments? Yi Tian shook his head and smiled. Yes, I can see. I feel that Shifu's realm is the later stage of the Golden Elixir realm. However, you just killed 3 monks in Yuanying realm with a sword, so? Morong Chanqian muttered. Yi Tian smiled again, Old 19, you are not wrong. Being a teacher is indeed a late cultivation achievement in the Golden Elixir realm, but it's nothing to kill several monks in Yuanying realm because of their special skills and some other reasons. You may not believe that when you were a teacher or a cultivation achievement in the Dragon Gate realm, you used special means to kill 2 big monks in Yupu realm one after another. When Shifu was in Longmen territory, she killed 2 great friars in Yupu territory one after another? Morong Chanqian petrified and stayed still again, although she secretly vowed never to be in a daze again. But the news was so shocking that it was impossible for everyone to hear it. Yi Tian nodded again inside, however, being a teacher has paid a great price. Master, may I ask who Master is? Morong Chanqian asked timidly. Yi Tian nodded slightly, this is nature. As a disciple of the Maitreya Palace, it's natural to know the origin of the ancestor. All the disciples of the palace know that the master is Sui Huang. Have you heard of it? Flint Emperor? Hearing these 2 words, Morong Chanqian almost lost his voice and exclaimed, stunned again. Is it that? Morong Chanqian spoke again after slowing down a little. Yi Tian waved his hand, there is no need to confirm. There is only one person who dares to call the Flint Emperor in the 10,000 regions of the heavens. The 13 disciples of Shueiyue sect who were present also stayed aside at this time and seemed to hear another impossible thing. Morong Chanqian habitually prepared to look back at them, but found that these people were looking at Yi Tian directly, as if they had no thought. How did you know your Shizu? Yi Tian was used to hearing the name of Emperor Sui. He went to Morong Chanqian and asked softly. Morong Chanqian took a long breath and said, the legend of the Sui Emperor has been circulating in the Shueiyue sect. It is said that these legends came from the ancestors. The ancestors said that there was a very powerful race on the ancestral star, called the Kunlun nationality. Hearing this, Yi Tian raised his eyebrows, but he didn't interrupt Morong Chanqian's story and continued to listen. Morong Qian continued, the Kunlun nationality is different from the ordinary people. It has sharp claws and 2 pairs of flesh wings besides limbs. The reason why we mention the Kunlun nationality is because the ancestors said that the Kunlun nationality is a descendant of Emperor Sui. The ancestors also said that Emperor Sui is the first person to kill all regions of the sky and command all armies of all regions against other races. It is something that no one can surpass, yes. We all grew up listening to the legend of the Flint Emperor, but we didn't expect that one day I would worship the Flint Emperor, and the seniority was unimaginable. The Flint Emperor turned out to be our master. If the ancestors had spirit in heaven, they would wake up and worship the Flint Emperor. Even if the inheritance of the Shueiyue sect was cut off, the ancestors would laugh. Morong Chanqian murmured, as if to Yi Tian and those ancestors. There was a lot of joy and infinite sorrow in his voice. Master, thank you for bringing us into the vein of the Flint Emperor. Saying this, Morong Chanqian knelt down to Yi Tian in the stone chamber. All the 13 elders of Washinjing behind her knelt down. It can be seen that they have recovered from their days one by one, and their faces become particularly excited. Get up! Yi Tian stretched out his hand and asked these people to get up. If I hadn't crossed the void and had an accident in the transmission, I would never have come to the spirit realm of Rose, and I wouldn't be able to meet you. Maybe that's what the master meant. By the way, do you want to meet the Kunlun nationality you mentioned earlier? I'm also a disciple of the Maitreya Palace. Ah! Kunlun friars have also joined the Maitreya Palace? Disciples really want to see the first strong family of ancestral stars in the mouth of their ancestors. Morong Chanqian said. Well, the left and right figures can't run. Yi Tian said, gestured and took out 2 magic weapons. After the prohibition was opened, Tian called out, "Come out." Kunlun cultivation is in different magic weapons caves. There are 2 caves. Hearing Tian's call, more than 200 people came out. Dead men, squires, disciples, plus Kunlun practitioners. See Master. See the Sun. See Grandmaster. See the Master. More than 200 people ignored the environment at the scene and bowed to Tian one by one according to the established order. Tian waved his hand, "Well, here are all booty. Whoever you receive will be the one." However, it seems that those Zumaji don't seem to have any attraction. These people just glanced at it and ignored it. They are still around Tian, full of untimely admiration. Such a scene made Morong Chanqian and the 13 elders sigh in their hearts. It seems that there is no water in what Master said. The Miluo Palace is rich to this extent. There is a Sumi precept for friars in the realm of God. The wealth in it must have a great attraction to friars, but none of these people are moved. That glance is real indifference. Well, I know you've been in the magic weapon cave for a long time. I'd like to know the current situation. Now I'll tell you that this is a place called Rose Spirit Realm, which is very close to our destination. Earth Star. Tian looked at the people helplessly and said. Immediately, the crowd cheered and cheered for a long time. "Come on, disciples, I'd like to introduce you to Morong Chanqian, the 19th disciple newly recruited by the teacher." "Please meet me in order," Tian Chao Morong Chanqian pointed. It turned out to be the 19th younger martial sister. "Alas, Master, how can it be the 19th, 16th, 17th, 18th directly?" Jinji, Yuya and other female disciples chirped and ran over, took Morong Chanqian's hand and showed great affection. "I'll introduce myself to you slowly in the future." Tian hurried when he knew that the gossip between women was endless. Because Mieba and the disciples of the Royal Beast Division are always busy branding a large number of demons in the Magic Weapon Cave, and they are not in the Magic Weapon Cave. Therefore, the first one to come is the second disciple. Junior Sister 19, I'm Duan Jingxiu, the second elder martial brother. I'll get familiar with you later. This is a little gift. It's only 200,000 fairy jade. Please accept it. Duan Jingxiu said, took out a storage bag and handed it to Morong Chanqian with a smile. He was used to the fact that Shifu accepted disciples from the divine realm, so he was not surprised. On the contrary, he thought that the 19th martial sister was a friar in Huashan realm, and she must have a lot of money. She had participated in some wars before, and she had a lot of money. If she took less gifts, it would be unreasonable. I'm afraid she would lose face to her master. Therefore, one shot is 200,000 Xinyu. Second senior brother, this can't be used. Morong Chanqian was holding a storage bag in his hand and buzzing in his head. This special meeting gift is too big. It is more than the number of fairy jade of the whole Shueiyue sect. No wonder they despise Zumaji on the ground. It is thought that no one can have such a large number of fairy jade in Zumaji except the leader of Tufu sect. 19th junior sister, I'm Hua Ziqing, the third senior sister. In the future, we'll be the same school. Get close to each other. If you have anything, just tell me. The second one came, Hua Ziqing. He took Morong Chanqian's hand. Similarly, he didn't have an expression like anxiety or fear because of her incarnation cultivation. This is 200,000 fairy jade, which is the gift of the third elder martial sister. This is also 200,000 fairy jade, which is the gift of my eldest martial brother. Hua Ziqing took out 2 storage bags one after another and handed them to Morong Chanqian. Next, in order, Lin Lan, Mo Kurson, Yu Yan and other disciples also came to meet one by one, and each gave a gift of 200,000 Xinyu. Morong Chanqian wanted to refuse, but these elder martial brothers and sisters were too enthusiastic to shirk. Finally, Xian and Biwan came. Even the 2 disciples with the lowest cultivation also took out 200,000 meeting gifts. There's no way. These disciples of Yi Tian are so rich that they can't use up all the fairy jade. Even if they don't have enough, anyone who tells Yi Tian may give them millions. Cleaning the battlefield like today has happened many times before. Every time you go to war, you will get a lot of booty. Even if Bai Huan didn't go to war, any elder martial brother or elder martial sister would share some profits. Accumulated, her fairy jade reached more than 1 million. Moreover, she has been practicing hard outside. She has been buried in the magic weapon cave. Now, from the original practice in the cave to the later stage of viewing the sea, the whole person has a different temperament because of the change of the environment. Also because several elder martial sisters gave her the elixir of beauty, her appearance has changed greatly from before, and she has become a graceful and beautiful nun. It can be said that because of Yi Tian's appearance, her fate has changed. As a female monk from the bottom, he especially cherishes this opportunity and gets along well with all senior brothers and sisters. For this younger martial sister, who is far higher than her own realm and older, her words are very polite. A simple meeting ceremony, Morong Qianqian received more than 2 million fairy jade, and his heart was filled with feelings. What made her feel most was that when she met the Kunlun people next, those Kunlun people with wings even gave themselves expensive gifts. Moreover, her generation changed from the youngest younger martial sister to the youngest martial ancestor. This dramatic change made her quite sad. Well, if you don't want these Shumi precepts, you'll give them to your younger martial sister. Look at the time. Yi Tian didn't introduce those squires and dead men, but waved and drove many disciples back to the cave. Give it to the younger martial sister, the disciples said, and obediently returned to the cave. They all knew that if they didn't obey, the master might not let them out next time. Lao 19, look, if you don't want these things, you'll have to throw them here. You can't let Shifu collect them. Yi Tian said after putting away 2 magic weapons in the cave. Come on, let's do it. Morong Qianqian waved to the elders, then motioned and took a Shumi ring into his hand. The others began to clean up the battlefield. Just now, Morong Qianqian, including Morong Qianqian, learned from this side how deep the inside information of the Maitreya palace is. In the face of Xianyu, which is rarely sought by other monks, those senior brothers and sisters are in trouble and no one wants it. If you accuse the ancestors of this, I'm afraid the ancestors will jump up and scold themselves for nonsense. The battlefield was cleaned quickly. Next, Yi Tian took Morong Qianqian and 13 elders to walk through the underground maze. After several small battles, there were no living Tufu disciples in the whole underground maze. More than 3 hours later, all the closing matters were over. The disciples of Shueiyue's sect were taken back to the magic weapon cave, and the martial spirit puppets were sent back to Zumaji. Situ Juanru put away his stone tablet and went back to the magic weapon cave to perform the master's task. Old 19, go to the next house. When only Yi Tian and Morong Qianqian were left in front of the great hall of the figure floating sect, Yi Tian called out the 6th order golden eye divine carving again and said. Morong Qianqian naturally had no opinion. They took the golden eye statue and continued to fly to the target sect gate. More than 2 hours later, we arrived at the location of the target's residence. After some investigation, the friars here have gone to Lukong. They don't hide. They really don't know where they are. Yi Tian took the golden eye statue and looked at the underground carefully within 1,000 miles of the Zongmen. He didn't find any trace of people. If the teacher's estimation is good, other targets may not be able to find a figure. In the sky, Yi Tian sat cross-legged on the back of the golden eye divine eagle and said to Morong Qianqian. Or forget it. Shifu was anxious to get back to Zuxing. Let's start now. Morong Qianqian thought and said. Yi Tian shook his head. Being a teacher means that those enemies don't know that we are in a hurry to leave Rose's spiritual realm and are unlikely to hide. It is likely that they have contacted each other and are ready to meet together to fight against the revenge of Shueiyue's sect. Which sect here has a deep hatred against Shueiyue's sect and is powerful, or has a solid defense field? The Pope's Gate often becomes the refuge they choose. The person who searched for souls before becoming a teacher has limited knowledge. Shifu's remark really reminded the disciples that there was a sect that met these 3 conditions at the same time. This sect was the sect with a space channel to Guanghan spirit domain. It was called Satan sect. Listen to. What a retarded name, it might as well be called Satan sect. Morong Qianqian thought about it and introduced it. Finally, he snorted coldly. It's really an interesting name. We don't have to worry about it now. No matter whether the teacher's guess is right or not, we need to do an important thing first. If we guess correctly, we also give them time to meet, so as to destroy those enemies in one fell swoop, and we don't have to spend time looking for them everywhere. Yi Tian said thoughtfully. Master, what else is important? Morong Chanxian asked curiously. Yi Tian commanded the golden eye statue to fall to the ground and said, of course, this important thing is to cut bones, wash marrow and distribute cultivation resources to the disciples of Shuiwei branch who are new to the Maitreya Palace. Since they join the Maitreya Palace, being a teacher will naturally treat each disciple fairly. Master. Thank you. Morong Chanxian was moved when she heard that the important thing the master said was this. She valued cutting bones and washing marrow more than equipping everyone with a half-immortal weapon. The magic weapon is only an external thing. Although it is extremely valuable, cutting bones and washing marrow changes the cultivation physique, so that every disciple can improve his cultivation speed, even to a height unimaginable before. Cutting bones and washing marrow for one or more disciples at the same time also requires massive resources. Those things that sound like Arabian Nights have been verified one by one. There is no exaggeration in any of the things Master said. Naturally, cutting bones and washing marrow for all disciples is not empty. Morong Chanxian's mood suddenly improved a lot. Although the Shuiwei sect led by him was suppressed in the spirit realm of Rose, his strength decreased a lot, and he had a great responsibility. There is no doubt that this choice should be the most correct decision he made. When my thoughts fluctuated and I was filled with emotion, the golden eye god sculpture fell next to a lake below. It's here, with beautiful mountains and rivers and open terrain. Yi Tian jumped down from the eagle's back, motioned and took out several magic weapons cave again. Soon, many disciples and dead men who had just returned to the magic weapon cave came out of the magic weapon cave, and Xianrun came out of it. Then Situ Juanru and Liao Tungwen also came out of their magic weapon cave. In another magic weapon cave, Nieba appeared again with the people of the Royal Beast Division. Xianrun, let the disciples of the palace out. The old 16, the old 17, the disciples of the Taisho branch and the Tiangong branch also lined up. I also love you to give orders continuously. With his orders, magic weapon caves are neatly lined up in dozens of rows by the lake, looking like a military camp. Many disciples rushed out from the inside and were summoned to the reserved open space. 500 or 600 magic weapon caves are arranged in several rows, and the scene is spectacular. The disciples from the Maitreya Palace and the Sacred Wind Army were divided into two camps and soon stood in line. On the other hand, a large number of monks from Tiangong branch and Taisho branch also poured out of the magic weapon cave, and stood neatly under the greetings of Liao Tungwen and Situ Juanru. More than 100,000 people already feel that this number is a lot when they are used as a number, but it is only a number after all. However, when more than 100,000 monks are standing in front of us, we can't just describe it as many. This scene is extremely shocking. In particular, all monks stand straight, all stand silent and silent, forming a kind of solemn atmosphere, as if more than 100,000 people are united into one, like a sharp sword waiting to be scabbarded. The next moment will be able to erupt into the power of mountains and seas. Morong Chanxian and the 13 elders of Shuiwei clan quietly looked at the scene in front of them. Unconsciously, they were deeply shocked again in their hearts. Once in the underground maze of Tufu sect, they saw Yi Tian's dead men and Yi Tian's squires and disciples. Many of them have reached Yuanying territory, and there are not a few friars at the peak of Jindan territory. Even many Kunlun people who call Yi Tian their ancestor have entered Yuanying territory. It is such a group of people who are willing to follow Yi Tian and worship and respect Yi Tian to the utmost. If we say that those are people who have a relationship with Yi Tian, we can be forgiven. However, in front of more than 100,000 people, they wear different clothes and have different cultivation levels, but they see the awe of Yi Tian in their eyes and the fanaticism of looking at Yi Tianshi. But Yi Tian's cultivation is only the golden elixir realm. He can command the heroes with one person. He can achieve this. The image of Yi Tian in their hearts rises sharply. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, even if anyone told them that there had been such a person and such a thing, they would not believe it. With a deep breath, Morong Chanqian unknowingly looked at the 13 elders around him, all of whom saw a bit of happiness from each other's eyes. At this time, Yi Tian has taken out a pile of semi-immortal soldiers' magic weapons, a dozen large vats and piles of fairy jade in front of the queue of more than 10,000 people, glittering and translucent, shaking people's eyes. A dead man went to fill the jar with lake water. Yi Tian took out the medicinal wine obtained from the Tiger King from Zumaji or adjusted the medicinal liquid after a moment. Everything is ready. Old 19, release the disciples of Shueiyue sect branch. Yi Tian came to Morong Chanqian and nodded slightly. Yes, master. Morong Chanqian agreed happily, waved to the elders, and his face was full of excitement. The friar who has reached the realm of transforming God has a sharp ear and eyes and 6 senses. The moment Yi Tian took out the medicinal wine, she knew that this kind of medicinal wine is by no means ordinary. After taking it, the friar will certainly get great benefits. Because only the smell of wine has made the mana in his body react. Smelling this smell makes him feel happy physically and mentally. Morong Chanqian knew very well that if he didn't join the Maitreya Palace in the spirit realm of Rose, I'm afraid the friars of Shueiyue sect would dream of getting a drop of such medicinal wine. At this time, the 13 elders started one after another, released more than 20 magic weapons, and called the disciples inside to line up. These disciples of Shueiyue sect did not release part of them in the underground maze of Tufu sect and took part in cleaning the battlefield, but many of them made their first appearance since they left the prison mountain. When they came out of the magic weapon cave, they were stunned to see such a scene, but when they saw Morong Chanqian and Yi Tian next to the Lord, these disciples quickly calmed down and began to line up according to the elders' instructions. It didn't take long for the line to line up and the whole audience was silent. The disciples of Shueiyue sect didn't know what had happened, but the disciples of the Maitreya Palace and the sergeant of the Sacred Wind Army had some guesses when they saw the Bansian soldier's magic weapon, fairy jade, and medicinal wine appear here again. Especially the sergeants of the Sacred Wind Army, who have not yet obtained the qualification to officially join the Maitreya Palace, can't help feeling twinkling of eyes when looking at the strange Shueiyue sect disciples opposite. When all the disciples of Shueiyue sect lined up, Yi Tianchao Morong Chanqian nodded. Morong Chanqian responded slightly, then went to the disciple of Shueiyue sect, glanced slowly at familiar faces, and then said loudly, all disciples of Shueiyue sect, after the discussion between the sect leader and 13 elders, led the disciples of Huzong to join the Maitreya Palace. Later, the disciples of Shueiyue sect are the disciples of the Maitreya Palace. All disciples of Shueiyue sect must abide by the rules of the Maitreya Palace, obey the scheduling of the palace leader, and those who violate the rules shall be dealt with in accordance with the rules. With her voice, the crowd couldn't help but have a slight discussion. Obviously, the news was too sudden. But the crowd soon calmed down. For a long time, out of their trust in the patriarch and the elders, these disciples of Shueiyue sect knew very well that there must be their reason for the patriarch and the elders to make this decision. Moreover, the relationship between these disciples and the elder of Shueiyue sect and the patriarch is very complex. Many people have more or less blood relationship, and they are all the descendants of the patriarch and the patriarch. After all, the 6,000 ancestors who came to the spirit realm of Rose have spread their branches and leaves since then. They have multiplied for many generations. They are all internal digestion without any external blood. Shueiyue sect. It is more suitable to be a big family than a sect. As a descendant or disciple, the senior and senior of the sect made a choice. Naturally, they would not have any objection. They just felt a little sudden and unprepared for the moment. Yi Tian walked slowly to the many disciples of Shueiyue sect. On this formal occasion, although all the disciples of Shueiyue sect knew him, Morong Chanqian solemnly introduced him. This is the leader of Yi Palace of the Maitreya Palace. Please see the leader of the palace. See Lord Yi. Many disciples also worship Yi Tian very much. Shueiyue sect is always attacked by thousands of 18 sect friars, and Yi Tian led people to kill them all. At that time, as soon as Yi Tian came out of the guard of the sect, the look of fighting local friars left a deep impression in the hearts of many Shueiyue sect friars. At this time, the sect leader has spoken again, and they did not neglect it. They all bowed down immediately. Yi Tian stood in front of the team, standing like a gun, glanced slowly at every Shueiyue sect disciple present, then nodded slightly to the crowd and said, "Welcome to join the Maitreya Palace." In the future, the Maitreya Palace and Shueisha sect will be a family. The leader of the palace makes the following arrangements according to the situation of Shueisha sect. Shueisha sect will retain its inheritance. As the Shueisha sect branch of the Maitreya Palace, all disciples of Shueisha sect will enjoy the same resource allocation as those of other branches of the Maitreya Palace. All disciples should abide by the rules, live in harmony and diligently practice in order to make great progress on the road of cultivation and get their wishes. Next, send resources to the newly introduced Shueisha sect branch disciples. Yes. With Yi Tian's words, 100 dead men and 20 squires agreed and began to hand out the Banxian soldiers flying swords in Xinyu one by one. No surprise, the resource rationing of this scale immediately aroused a strong reaction. The disciples of Shueisha sect never thought that when they first entered the Maitreya Palace, they should be given a half-immortal weapon per person. You know, in Shueisha sect, there are only 2 semi-immortal magic weapons in the sect of more than 10,000 Shueisha sect disciples, one of which is owned by the sect leader Morong Qian, and the other is on the elder, the old woman. And it's just like a dream to distribute so many fairy jade at one time. I think it's so unreal. Lord Yi said that the inheritance of Shueisha sect should be preserved. The disciples of Shueisha sect, as a branch, do not disturb the original personnel. This situation is very inclusive, so that these disciples do not have any resistance at all. Now we get so many resources, which means the convenience and possibility of cultivation. Soon, the Shui Yuzong team began to warm up, and a burst of cheers broke out from time to time. What truth can you draw from this scene? Morong Qian, who had retreated to one side, asked the old woman around him. If you have to sum up, it is that the tree dies and the people live. Shui Yuzong has finally come to life, the old woman thought and said. Morong Qian laughed. What you said is reasonable, but there is a sense of truth. I think these bastards are open to money and milk as their mother. Ha! It can be said that everyone is happy, the old woman smiled with her shriveled lips. It takes a long time to distribute resources to more than 10,000 Shueisha sect disciples, especially the distribution of half-immortal soldiers' magic weapons, which is not to take one at random. But these disciples of Shueisha sect have more initiative and can choose the most suitable magic weapon according to their cultivation conditions and habits. Otherwise, after receiving a half-immortal soldier magic weapon at will, all disciples feel dissatisfied. In the next step, they have to exchange with other disciples with the same idea, which is more troublesome. So this time, Yi Tian wanted to be in place at one time and get what he needed. He wasn't in a hurry. He wanted to leave more time for the local sects in Rose's spiritual realm. After a long time, the half-immortal soldiers flying sword and fairy jade were distributed. Finally, the most important link came. Taking medicinal wine, cutting bones and washing marrow. The disciples of Shueisha sect branch lined up in more than 10 rows, each with a spoonful of medicinal wine, and then practiced in situ to refine the wine. The procedure went smoothly. In the end, all the disciples of Shueisha sect took the medicinal wine. The scene of more than 10,000 people cutting bones and washing marrow at the same time was very shocking. Those sergeants of the Sacred Wind Army watched this scene with very complicated expressions. People of Shueisha sect joined the Maitreya Palace so easily, but they had many difficulties in trying to become formal disciples of the Maitreya Palace and were always unable to enter. In particular, after joining the Maitreya Palace and after bone cutting and marrow washing, some friars they know have greatly improved their cultivation, but they are much behind. These people unconsciously have a big gap in their hearts. One by one psychology is very bad, but who can blame it? Lord Yi didn't give them a chance, but they didn't grasp the opportunity. As long as they stood over, they could become disciples of the Maitreya Palace, but as a result, they gave up. I really should have said that. I couldn't afford to look at it before, but now I can't afford to climb high. On the other side, Morong Qian and the 13 elders looked at the scene in front of them. They were not only pleased, but also had a little regret in their hearts. Yi Tian only said that he would cut bones and wash marrow for the disciples of Shueisha branch, which naturally did not include the 14 senior leaders. They were also embarrassed to put down their faces and queue up with those disciples to take them. It's just such a treasure. It's a pity to miss it. Just when some regrets appeared in these people's hearts, Tian came over. Lao 19, this kind of bone cutting and marrow washing can change the physique, which will expel a lot of impurities in the body. Just like you see the situation of those disciples, it will be very embarrassed. This kind of medicinal wine changes the physique and has nothing to do with the cultivation realm, so the concentration of medicinal wine is also suitable for monks in all realms. I specially prepared some for you separately. You can cut bones by yourself at your convenience. Wash the marrow. Note that the dosage can only be 1 spoonful. I've prepared a little surplus. You can dispose of it yourself in the future. As he spoke, he motioned, and more than a dozen white shadows ejected and flew to Morong Chantian and others. Thank you, Master. You know Master won't leave us. Morong Chantian glanced at the white jade bottle in his hand, and a surprised color suddenly appeared on his face. Thank you, Palace Master. The other 13 elders also excitedly took it in their hands and thanked them. It's best to cut bones and wash marrow alone. The family doesn't speak 2 words. As for the magic weapons of half-immortal soldiers, they all give ordinary half-immortal soldiers flying swords to ordinary disciples. I have top half-immortal soldiers' magic weapons here, and each person chooses 3. As he spoke, Tian gestured, and hundreds of semi-immortal soldiers' magic weapons with quality significantly higher than those semi-immortal soldiers' magic weapons immediately floated in front of the people. These people didn't even say thanks, and their eyes fell on the magic weapons of the top half-immortal soldiers. Looking at hundreds of magic weapons of this level, even Morong Chantian, who was used to seeing the big audience, felt dazzled. With her knowledge, she can naturally see that these semi-immortal soldiers' magic weapons, even touching one with their eyes closed, are much better than their own. Now, you can choose 3 of them. Looking at these half-immortal soldiers' magic weapons, Morong Chantian had to admit that he was a little picky. At this time, the other 13 elders had taken back their eyes from these semi-immortal soldiers' flying swords and looked at Morong Chantian. To choose the top half-immortal soldier magic weapon, Morong Chantian must be the first to choose. Who dares to override it? It took a long time for Morong Chantian to finish reading these top half-immortal soldiers' magic weapons one by one, and finally made a decision. He chose 2 flying swords, one for flying against the sword and the other for facing the enemy. In addition, he also chose a short gun with dark color for standby. Morong Chantian was followed by the old woman, the elder of Shueiyue branch. She had already pre-selected several pieces, but one of them was selected by Morong Chantian, so she carefully selected 3 from the other pre-selected magic weapons. These elders chose one by one according to their order in the sector. Finally, everyone got the magic weapon of satisfaction. Some people even couldn't help being excited, so they put the brand of God in place and recognized the Lord. Except Morong Chantian and the old woman elder, the other elders have no magic weapons of half-immortal soldiers. Now they have 3 at a time, and they are the top magic weapons of half-immortal soldiers. Naturally, they can't put it down. In this case, Tian just smiled, gestured and put away the remaining half-immortal soldiers' magic weapons. Master, I'm curious. Where did you get so many half-immortal soldiers' magic weapons? Seeing Tian turning to leave, Morong Chantian grabbed Tian and asked. Before, some questions related to the secret of the sect. Morong Chantian had trouble asking too much. Now his identity is different. He has become a disciple of the Maitreya Palace, and Tian is his master, so he has no pressure to ask. Tian stopped his steps and said with a smile, naturally, so many half-immortal soldiers' magic weapons were taken from others. Many people who are unfavorable to Master or do evil have died in the hands of the Master. All the wealth of the Maitreya Palace, including the booty. All robbed? How could it be? Morong Chantian was stunned. How many people do you have to kill? Tian shook his head gently, I don't know. Then he ignored Morong Chantian and walked away. Morong Chantian looked at Tian's back and was even more shocked. He didn't know how many people he had killed. What kind of number should it be? Tian didn't care what Morong Chantian thought. He really didn't know how many people he had killed. After taking a look at the Water Moon sect friar who was still refining medicinal wine, Tian came to the Sacred Wind Army, and he didn't see how he moved. His body slowly rose to the low altitude, and his eyes swept across faces. You kamikaze sergeants, although you are not the official disciples of the Maitreya Palace now, for the sake of your cultivation, the medicinal wine prepared by the palace master this time also brings out your dose. Each kamikaze sergeant takes a spoonful in line and refines it locally. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Palace Leader. The sacred wind soldiers immediately burst into shouts like mountains and seas. They waved their arms, jumped and shouted, and expressed their inner excitement in different ways. Finally, wait until this day. Finally, they can cut bones and wash marrow. Compared with the flying sword of half-immortal soldiers, they pay more attention to this medicinal wine. Everything else is foreign. Cutting bones and washing marrow is the fundamental. Yi Tian's words swept away the depression and loss in these people's hearts. Such a big movement naturally attracted the attention of the disciples of Shueiyue branch. Now they know that these so-called kamikaze sergeants are not official disciples of the Maitreya Palace, and even the Maitreya Palace did not cut their bones and wash their marrow. From the previous situation, these people are familiar with Yi Tian's memory of the disciples of the Maitreya Palace. We can know that Yi Tian should have been following him for some time. Even so, there is still no chance of bone cutting and marrow washing. As soon as they joined the Maitreya Palace, they were given priority in resource rationing and cutting bones and washing marrow before them. Almost all the disciples of Shueiyue branch were moved for a while. Yi Tian's words immediately warmed up the scene. The sergeants of Shinfeng army lined up to take medicinal wine, and then went to the lake to refine it on site. Time passed bit by bit. After tea time, Yi Tian suddenly looked up into the distance and flew up into the sky. With his figure, Liao Tongguan, Situ Juanru and Morong Qianqian also flew to Yi Tian's side, and their faces became a little ugly. Master, what should I do? How could they gather so many monks? Morong Qianqian said with a big change in his face, feeling the situation 20 or 30,000 miles away. Within the range of mind sensing, countless local friars swarmed into the sky, and there were not many people. Moreover, judging from its speed, the front friars were basically high-level friars in Huashan realm and Yuanying realm, and many friars behind also had accomplishments in Jindan realm. Old 19, is there a transmission array in the spirit realm of Rose? Otherwise, they can't gather so many people in a short time, and they can't come so fast. Yi Tian said with a gloomy face. According to his eyesight, there are at least 5 or 6 million monks coming, which is far more than the number of disciples in the Maitreya Palace. Hearing Yi Tian's question, Morong Qianqian woke up and said, yes, there is a transmission array, but we foreigners have never seen their transmission array. Shifu knows that Shueiyue sect has always been bullied. As for where there is a transmission array, the disciple doesn't know the relevant information. Yi Tian nodded slightly and said, it's not difficult to guess. It must be that they used the messenger to contact, sent people through the transmission array and contacted in many ways. They refused to be broken by each of us and were ready to fight us at all costs. Shifu, it's better to let all the disciples enter the cave. Let's avoid the edge for the time being. There are too many people in each other. No matter how brave Shifu is and how powerful the magic weapon is, it's impossible to take into account everyone's needs. Morong Qianqian said anxiously. Yi Tian glanced at the sergeant of the Sacred Wind Army and the disciple of Shueiyue branch who were refining the power of medicinal wine, gently shook his head and said, when cutting bones and washing marrow, it's most forbidden to interrupt halfway. At least, all previous efforts will be wasted, but at the same time, the refining of medicinal wine will not hurt the meridians. Although I still have some medicinal wine in my hand, the quantity is limited, and I use some less. Some disciples with poor qualifications can't even bear twice cutting bones and washing marrow. For many people, this is their only chance in this life. Needless to say, I'm ready to welcome you fight. Yes. Morong Qianqian nodded slightly and promised not to say anything more. Since Shifu had decided, it was inconvenient for her to say anything more. Although she felt that choosing to fight to death was not a good policy, even if all her previous efforts were wasted, she could retain her life. So many people could not fight at all. The combat effectiveness of the disciples of the Maitreya Palace was greatly reduced, and more importantly, the local monks too many people, too fierce. Don't worry, the attack of hundreds of thousands of monks is just a small scene. I can see such a battle. Seeing Morong Chanshan's worried look, Tian smiled and comforted, and then looked at Morong Juanru. Old 17, how many martial spirit puppets have been refined and what state have they reached? Situ Juanru bowed down and said, Master, more than 8,000 have been refined, and all of them have been branded with divine thoughts. Well, how about the fighting effectiveness of the martial spirit puppet? Tian continued to ask. The defense power is higher than the original Wuhuan puppet, and the attack power reaches the later stage of Yuanying territory. All of them have been tested one by one, but most of them have not been installed with the best fairy jade. Each Wuhuan puppet needs more than 30,000 pieces of the best fairy jade, Situ Juanru immediately replied. Tianshan took out a Shumi ring and threw it to Situ Juanru. This is 100,000 pieces of the best fairy jade. Install it for the Wuhuan puppet immediately, and keep the rest for standby. Yes, Master, Situ Juanru took Zumaji, promised and fell to the ground. Because the time was urgent, there could be no delay at all. Xian run. When Situ Juanru left, Tian shouted again. Not far away, Xianran appeared out of thin air and saluted Tian respectfully. Master, the old slave is here. How did the 5 or 6 rank monster recognize the Lord? Tian asked directly. Return to the Master. All the 6-level monsters recognize the Master, a total of 48. About 70% of the 5-level monsters recognize the Master, a total of 86,000. Well, be ready to fight at any time. Tian nodded and called again, kill bully. On the ground, Nieba, who had already entered Yuanying territory, heard the Master's call and flew into the air. Master, Nieba is. How does the monster of the Royal Beast Division recognize the Lord? Tian asked. Nieba hugged his fist and said, Master, there are 360,000 4th-order monsters. All recognize the Lord. Do you need disciples to let them out? Don't release it first. Inform all the disciples of the Royal Beast Division to prepare for the enemy and wait for orders. Tian looked at Nieba and said. He secretly wanted to release it now. If he scared away the local monks, would he have to chase them one by one? Yes, Master, Nieba said nothing, and promised to arrange the Royal Beast disciples. Morong Chanshan and 13 elders nearby were shocked again when they saw the whole process of Tian's staffing arrangement. Originally, they thought they had generally known the strength of the Maitreya Palace, but only then did they know that what they saw was only the tip of the iceberg of the details of the Maitreya Palace. 48 6-level monsters equivalent to friars in the realm of God, more than 8,000 Yuan baby territory, later martial soul puppets, 86,000 5th-order monsters, 360,000 4th-order monsters. Morong Chanshan did not dare to think about what would happen if all these fighting forces participated in the war, plus hundreds of thousands of local monks. Her mind was always open. In this moment, the team of local monks had flown out and shortened the distance of more than 10,000 miles. It should not be long before they could reach the Great Lake. At this time, Situ Juanru flew to Tian again. Master, the martial spirit puppets have all been equipped with fairy jade and can fight at any time. Tianlu took the lead and asked, how many pieces of treasure clothes have been refined? Back to Master, more than 20,000 pieces have been refined, Situ Juanru immediately replied. How about armor refining? Tian continued. 3,000 pieces of dragon armor and 12,000 pieces of black dragon armor, Situ Juanru blurted out the quantity. Tian nodded again and shouted, all the disciples of Huashan realm, Yuanying realm, later stage and peak stage of Jindan realm are equipped with treasure clothes, the disciples of Huashan realm and Yuanying realm are equipped with divine dragon armor, and the peak and later stage disciples of Jindan realm are equipped with black dragon armor. Huathan slate is arranged around the bone cutting and marrow washing disciples. Huathan sand is laid, and the disciples in the later stage of Jindan territory and the peak are responsible for protecting it. All disciples below the middle stage of the golden elixir realm enter the cave. Every word Tian said was an order, and almost everyone took action immediately. Situ Juanru promised and fell on the ground again. Disciples below the middle stage of the golden pill realm returned to the cave one after another. The dead man, Yi Tian's disciples and Kunlun Shou gestured continuously, laying huafan stones on the periphery of many disciples cutting bones and washing marrow by the lake. Because these people need to use mana to refine medicinal wine when cutting bones and washing marrow, Yi Tian personally went down to point out the laying distance, so as not to delay the refining of medicinal power due to the influence of huafan stone. However, the elders of Tiangong sect took out items such as dragon armor, black dragon armor, treasure clothes, and placed them in a large area. According to the distribution standard formulated by Yi Tian, they asked the disciples of the Maitreya palace to come and take them for themselves. It seemed that the figure kept flashing and seemed to be in a mess, as if frightened by hundreds of thousands of local friars. In fact, they all performed their duties, acted in an orderly manner and were busy regardless. Chaos is just an appearance. The friars who got the treasure clothes and armor immediately put the brand of divine thought on them. After recognizing the Lord, they put them on their bodies. These people also include Morong Chanxian and other disciples of Shueiyue sect. Close the cave. Seeing that all the disciples below the middle stage of the golden elixir realm entered the magic weapon cave, Yi Tian shouted again. He himself also fell to the ground, gestured continuously, and collected all his magic weapon cave into Zumaji. Xianrun, 13 elders of Shueiyue sect, Situjuanwu, Liao Tungwen and others did not dare to neglect, but moved quickly with Yi Tian's figure. Hundreds of magic weapons caves originally placed by the lake were suddenly empty. Put away the magic weapon in the cave, Yi Tian rose up in the air and shouted again, the Royal Beast Division, Tiangong Division and all disciples above Yuanying territory, take off. Ready to fight, every order is executed without fail. With Yi Tian's loud drink, the monks he ordered flew up to the low altitude with him. Even some monks who got armor and treasure clothes did not complete the brand of God, but also followed in the past and continued to refine in the high altitude. The total number of monks who rose from the air was about 11,000. They lined up a human wall over the Great Lake, protecting the disciples who cut bones and washed marrow behind them. The situation suddenly became tense. After dozens of breaths, a long black line appeared faintly in the sky. Then the black line became thicker and bigger, and turned into an army of countless monks in the sight of everyone, rushing here quickly. Everyone is ready, listen to my orders, and don't attack without authorization. Yi Tian stood in the air with a fierce flying sword, stood in the front of the team, stared at the friars all over the sky, and shouted softly. As soon as his voice fell, Morong Chanxian, who was behind him, exclaimed, monsters. They also have monsters. I know that there must be people from the Juling sect. The other party also has monsters. Not only Morong Chanxian found this situation, but all the monks present had found the change of the situation. The army of local friars has been within the visible range of the naked eye. Let alone observing with the mind, it is with the naked eye. As long as the eyes are not blind, you can also see that the friars flying in front released many monsters and fiercely rushed here. Yi Tian visually observed that there were at least more than 100,000 monsters. Looking at the speed of those monsters, they opened a long distance after being released. With different speeds, it can be judged that they are generally third-order to fifth-order monsters. The 6 or 7 who rushed to the front was just a 6th-level monster without shape. After releasing the monster, those local friars slowed down. Obviously, they wanted to let the monster take the lead, rush into the array and weaken their strength, and then their local friars cooperated with the monster to fight. No wonder they know that the leader of the palace has mountain and river seals, which can crush everything. They dare to come in a fierce manner because they want to use these monsters as cannon fodder. Seeing the intention of the other party, Yi Tianling snorted and looked at the approaching herd without issuing any orders. The herd is also very open. It is 5 or 6 miles away. With the continuous gallop, it is closer and closer to the lake bank. Martial spirit puppet attack. When the herd was less than 10 miles away from the lake bank, Yi Tian suddenly shouted. The Huashan and Yuanying disciples of Tiangong sect dared not neglect, but released their own martial spirit puppets, which recognized the Lord. They dispersed and also opened a distance of 5 or 6 miles to quickly meet the herd. Yi Tian has used martial spirit puppets to fight in Laoshan, Taroman and Tufu. Yi Tian guesses that the existence of martial spirit puppets must not be a secret by the way of summoning local monks, but many of his demons have never been exposed. He simply paralyzed the local friars with a martial soul puppet, making the other party think that they have played all their cards here, and less scruples. In this way, we can be more surprised and have a big attack. A total of more than 8,000 Wuhuan puppets quickly collided with the demons and beasts. All these Wuhuan puppets were refined by Tian Donzong. They all used extremely hard materials and mixed with precious Tian Kai and earth treasures. Their hardness has exceeded the peak Wuhuan puppets in Yuanying territory controlled by Yi Tian. And these martial spirits have their own combat effectiveness, which also has the level of the later stage of Yuanying territory. This is a group of killing machines. No, it's animal killing machines. More than 8,000 martial spirit puppets crashed into the herd in the most brutal, direct and barbaric way, and many monsters were directly hit by these powerful figures. They don't need defense, they just attack and kill. Even the sixth-order monsters dare not directly collide with these martial spirit puppets. As soon as the demons and beasts came into contact with the army of Wuhuan puppets, they showed a situation of falling on one side. No demons and beasts can resist the army of Wuhuan puppets. A lot of flesh and blood flew and screamed. Many monsters fell from the air and fell into the lake below. However, compared with the other party's army of more than 100,000 monsters, the number of 8,000 puppets is more than 10 times different. The two sides quickly hedged. Some monsters that did not directly collide with the puppet let the Wuhuan puppet pass from different directions from left, right, top, or bottom, and continued to rush straight towards the lake bank. More than half of them. Yi Tian, who was expressionless, suddenly made a gesture. The more than 1,300 Wuling puppets at the peak of Yuanying territory under his control appeared out of thin air, each holding a half-immortal art of war treasure, and quickly greeted them. He had expected that 8,000 martial spirit puppets could not stop all the demons and beasts of local friars, so his martial spirit puppets were used as a reserve team. Although the number of more than 1,300 martial soul puppets is much less than that of 8,000 martial soul puppets, their lethality is very strong. The figures waved the magic weapons of the half-immortal soldiers. Before they met the monsters, these Wuling puppets at the peak of Yuanying territory found their own targets. The order they got was to kill the highest level monsters without paying attention to those low level monsters. Yi Tian wants to kill the high level monster of the local friars to the greatest extent in the shortest time. The more than 1,300 martial spirit puppets well executed Yi Tian's instructions. Regardless of the impact of any monster, they just stared at their pre-selected targets and issued thunderous attacks. Naturally, while the high-level monsters of the local friars suffered heavy losses, many low-level monsters rushed past and rushed straight to Yi Tian and others. The number is still 30,000 or 40,000. Now it's our turn. Yi Tian too said without looking back. The next moment, there was a mountain and river seal on his hand. When the monster rushed over, he let it out. He should use the cards that the other side knows as soon as possible, so as to make those local monks put down their vigilance to the greatest extent. Because when the monster of the local friars attacked, the local friars had stopped in the air 20 or 30 miles away and seemed to be observing the charge of the monster. It seems that the other party is still very cautious. Yi Tian wants to paralyze them, turn their caution into impulse, and let them rush over as recklessly as possible. More than 1,300 martial spirit puppets have killed a large number of high-level monsters. They can rush to the 6th-level monsters. None of them, even the 5th-level monsters, are very few. They are some lucky fish. The main body of 30 or 40,000 monsters is the 3rd and 4th order monsters. Although it seems that the number is extremely large, Yi Tian doesn't care. The mountain and river seal was sacrificed to suppress the monsters within 100 mu area. Some disciples of the Maitreya palace flashed under the mountain and river seal and killed the monsters wantonly. Many incarnation friars, Yuanying friars, each wielded the magic weapon of half-immortal soldiers and killed into the herd. It is still a massacre. In the face of so many high-level friars, those earth-level monsters can only be slaughtered. In the distance, the 8,000 martial spirit puppets of Tiangong sect, after hedging, did not kill the local friars opposite, but turned around one after another to chase and kill the monsters scattered nearby that did not rush to the lake bank. There are a lot of these monsters, 20 or 30,000. Yi Tian's more than 1,300 martial spirit puppets, after killing the target, then hid and killed the monster rushing to Yi Tian. The battlefield was in chaos. But look closely, it is Yi Tian's massacre of local friars and monsters. There were only 11,000 monks who took off to fight on Yi Tian's side. Although Yi Tian's mountain and river seal helped the battle, there were only more than 20,000 monsters intercepted at one time. At the moment of close combat between the two sides, more than 10,000 monsters rushed through the blockade on Yi Tian's side and rushed towards the friars on the lake bank. Some of these monsters are not big, but they are fast. Others are tall and big, bigger than 4 or 5 cows. However, Yi Tian has already arranged the defense here. The friars who cut bones and wash marrow are protected in the middle. A large number of Huafan stones are laid around. Under the water near the lake, the disciples of Tiangong branch also put a lot of Huafan stone plates. The third and fourth order monsters that rushed over could not fly over the area affected by Huafan stone. At the moment of flying to Huafan stone, they lost all their mana and fell down. The figures of the monks in the golden elixir realm in this area are to kill them all to protect the disciples who cut bones and wash marrow, so as to prevent some monsters from rushing into or falling into this area and causing harm and disturbance to them. 20 or 30 miles away, hundreds of people stood in a row in front of the local monk army there and looked at the battlefield. Dear Taoist friends, the monster of our sect has lost a lot. You should be worthy of your conscience and give our sect enough compensation, a curly yellow-bearded middle-aged friar in the queue shouted at the people around him with an anxious expression. Lord Andrew, don't worry. We are all trustworthy friars. The monsters of the giant spirit sect play a great role and have tried to play the cards of those foreigners. Although that huge magic weapon is powerful, the range of defense is very limited. Their human magic weapons also have a certain lethality, but the number is too small. We just have to kill those foreigners who control them, they will become immovable waste. We are all good friends and everyone listens to me. Let's go now to avoid that huge magic weapon and kill those foreigners. A little death and injury is nothing. If we miss today's opportunity, we will be broken one by one. A tall eagle hook-nosed friar next to the friar with curly hair and yellow beard gestured loudly. There's nothing to hesitate about. We've discussed it for a long time. The monsters of the Juling sect fight the vanguard, and then go together to kill those hateful foreigners. The huge magic weapon belongs to our Juling sect. Now their people have participated in the battle, and we have seen their strength. Those who can participate in the war have already shot. Don't hesitate, don't wait, stand up, rush up. Andrew was obviously dissatisfied with the local monks who had not acted. He complained and urged with an ugly face. Well, our local warriors, it's time for us to defend our homeland. Now follow me and tear those foreigners to pieces. Be careful not to fight with those humanoid magic weapons, but to kill their master. Those humanoid magic weapons are mine. Great warriors of the spirit region of Rose, charge, and future generations will remember our feat today. With that, the eagle hook-nosed friar took the lead in flying his sword towards the lake bank. The other local monks also let go of their speed and spread their distance from each other, forming a team of tens of miles long and killing them in the direction of the disciples of the Maitreya Palace. These people were quite clever. They took a circuitous attack formation, and coincidentally bypassed the location of Yi Tianshan River Seal, avoided the protection area of those martial spirit puppets, and prepared to use the advantage of numbers to surround Yi Tianshan. In the direction of the lake bank, Yi Tian, while urging the mountain and river seal to suppress many monsters who are not worried, pays attention to the situation of the local monk army. When he saw that the other party really took the opportunity to rush over, he couldn't help but rejoice in his heart and said a few words to the Shinran voice in Mieba and invisibility. Then he began to slowly shrink the team back to form a circular defense formation, protect many bone-cutting and marrow-washing soldiers in the rear and the middle, and look ready to defend hundreds of thousands of local friars. According to common sense, this is the necessary response in the face of such a large number of army attacks. The local friars rushed closer and closer, and the remaining monsters had been killed by this time. Many Wulin puppets, whether Yi Tian's Wulin puppet or Tiangong branch's Wulin puppet, were all recruited back and joined the defense queue. Volley 7 miles 6 miles. Almost a few seconds later, the local friars with high-speed impact had rushed into the 5-mile range. Both Nieba and Xianrun, who was invisible, were looking at Yi Tian and waiting for his order. At the next moment, Yi Tian's right hand suddenly raised high and fell heavily. This is the signal of attack. Seeing this gesture, Nieba immediately shouted, "Let the beast go." As soon as his voice got up, Xianrun had already moved. Dozens of spirit animal rings appeared in his hands in an instant, and then batch after batch of demon beasts appeared out of thin air. After a slight pause in the air, he rolled up a gust of wind and rushed towards the friars all over the sky. At this time, the monk's army was only 2 miles away from Yi Tian. This is the best attack distance. During the impact, the local friars will rush out a distance under the action of inertia. If the other party stops, at least the distance between them will be shortened by a mile. In this way, the two sides immediately fought close combat to form a scuffle. Yi Tian was not worried that it would lead to the overall withdrawal of the local friars. Xianrun released a batch of monsters and rushed to the local monk army. He reacted quickly and released monsters quickly. Nieba was a little slow, but the 3rd and 4th level monster was not controlled by him, but by more than 300 disciples of the whole beast control division. More than 300 disciples released monsters at the same time. The number of monsters released by Xianrun is no longer comparable to that released by Xianrun. Monsters were continuously released and rushed to the local friars in different directions. Between Yi Tian camp and the local friars camp, there were almost monsters in different realms, and they were still pouring out continuously, repeatedly, and endlessly. Such a terrible scene made the local monks who rushed over quickly slow down. When they wanted to stop, the army of monks had collided with many monsters. A scuffle was formed. "We've got a plan. Come on," all the warriors gathered together and cover each other and retreat. "Damn it, how can these damn foreigners have so many monsters?" "Matter!" the eagle-hook-nose friar exclaimed. After swearing, he began to command the team to start defense. Martial spirit puppet attack. At this time, Yi Tian shouted again, and the more than 1,300 martial spirit puppets he controlled rushed out again. Followed by more than 8,000 yuan of late-stage martial soul puppets controlled by Tiangong branch. In the face of many local monks, these martial soul puppets are still like entering the uninhabited land. "Tarlai, you should fight according to the plan, rush over and kill those friars, and there will be no threat to their monster and human magic weapon." Andrew flashed and let a monster rush over and said loudly, "I'm sorry, my dear Lord Andrew, the plan hasn't changed quickly. There are too many monsters and they are still emerging. If they attack forcibly, there will be a lot of casualties. Don't worry about your great magic weapon. Remember, Andrew, the most precious thing in the world is life, and it's only once. Let's get out of here. There's not one foreigner in a word. If you want to keep the Green Mountains, are you not afraid of no firewood? Don't be stubborn, okay? I'll withdraw first." The eagle hooked his nose and killed a rushing monster with a sword. After saying that quickly, he flashed back and fled away. Master, the one who escaped was Tarlai, the almighty sect leader who had the deepest hatred with Shueiyue's sect. The space channel to Guanghan spirit domain was in his sect door. At this time, Morong Qianqian suddenly pointed to the back of the eagle hook-nosed friar and said that in order to escape here as soon as possible, he flew straight into the air, which was very conspicuous. "Well, catch this man alive." Yi Tian nodded slightly, and the 6th order golden eye divine carving appeared out of thin air. Yi Tian's body flashed, stepped on the back of the carving and shouted, "Old 19, Xianrun, come up." Morong Qianqian and Xianrun, who was already in shape, said nothing. As soon as they flew to the carving back, Yi Tian looked at more than 10,000 monks below and said, "Wait for the opportunity to protect the disciples of the palace below." With that, the golden eye eagle had shaken its wings and disappeared from the eyes of the people. "Fellow disciples, let's go to revenge." As soon as Yi Tiangang left, the elder and old woman of Shueiyue branch said to Situjuanru and Liao Tungguan, nodded to the other 12 Shueiyue sect elders, and they flew up and rushed to the battlefield. Among the local monks, they found some enemies who had blood debts in the past, and their hatred was immediately ignited. It should have been Shueisec's action to avenge our disciples, but Yi Tian helped so much that even if he didn't see his enemy, the elders of Shueisec wouldn't stand idly by. Although it's dangerous, as the elders of Shueisec, they also have their own dignity. In this war, blood must be seen on their swords. Let's go up, too, those disciples who transformed the divine realm. Liao Tongguan said to Situjuanru that the disciple of Taisho sect would fly to the battlefield. Ha ha ha, with our Tiangong branch, how can you fight alone? Come on, Tiangong branch and Taisho branch join hands to meet the fellow disciples of Shueisec branch first, Situjuanru laughed. Old 17 said to use Huafan stone slab? Liao Tongguan smiled and asked. Yes, it's a wise man who has a treasure and doesn't use it, Situjuanru said, and took the lead in flying to the battlefield with the imperial sword of 8 Washenjing friars of Tiangong division. With a wave of his hand, Liao Tongguan followed him with 7 disciples from the Taisho branch. In the high altitude thousands of miles away, Tarlai, who turned the peak of the divine realm, left all the friars and even many of his disciples and fled with all his strength. The result of this allied battle was really beyond his expectation. When the general situation was lost, his only idea was to save his life. His destination was Rousseau City, which was more than 50,000 miles away, where there was a transmission array to other places. As long as it can be transmitted, he has more hope of escape. At least those foreigners may not be able to find themselves in a short time. His speed is fast. The battlefield within 100 miles has been far behind him. Within the coverage of his mind, no one is chasing him. It seems that the top friar of his divine realm still has a certain deterrent. Whether it is a monster or a magic weapon of human nature, including those foreign friars dare not come to chase him. While he was flying away and complacent, suddenly a big bird appeared out of thin air and stopped in front of him. The giant bird is big enough to be the size of a house. The most prominent feature is that the feathers of the bird's 2 eye sockets are all golden, and the 2 bird eyes are also golden. These did not attract Teriel's attention. All his attention fell on the stranger on the big bird's back. Seeing the man above, Teriel turned, deflected a direction and fled quickly. At this time, he only felt a flash of light in front of him. Suddenly, his body tightened and lost his ability to move. Where his eyes could reach, he was surprised to find that he had been trapped in a strong and incomparably bright net. This change made Tali extremely frightened and immediately lost his blood color on his face. Xianrun Tianluo netted and caught Tald. He didn't look at the local friar with a big eagle-hooked nose. He thought and sent him directly into the spirit beast ring. It's so easy to catch him? Morong Chanshan next to Yi Tian was stunned. Yi Tian sent an idea to the golden eye divine eagle and asked him to return. Then he looked at Morong Chanshan and said, it's just to capture a monk who turns the peak of the divine realm. Even if it's a big monk in Yupu realm, it's okay to capture one at a time. Xianrun. After the war, search this man's soul, and then give it to old 19 to avenge him. Don't accidentally kill him. Morong Chanshan immediately felt very speechless, and his heart was shocked again. She thought that since she saw hundreds of thousands of monsters in the Maitreya palace, even if she had a thorough understanding of Yi Tian's cards, she could not imagine that the capture of Tald this time made her feel the unfathomable depth of her master. Yi Tian once mentioned the great friar of Yupu territory twice. Last time he said to kill 2 people in succession. Now he says to catch one accurately. It's true to see it. It can't be fictional. Unfathomable. Morong Chanshan repeated the word again in his heart. Just when her little thoughts were not completely exhausted, the golden eye divine eagle with the power of heavenly spirit wings had flown back to the battlefield. Then, Yi Tian's magic weapon printing has been sold and turned into 100 musais, covering a small area of the battlefield. There is a Wulin puppet at the peak of Yuanying territory intercepting a local friar in Huashan territory. The friar can't help the Wulin puppet because the defense of the Wulin puppet is too abnormal and almost immortal. However, the martial spirit puppet could not help the local monk who turned into a god, because his mana was so powerful that he shook the martial spirit puppet away when he raised his head and threw his foot. However, this situation changed immediately under the cover of mountains and rivers. One India shocks all directions. The powerful gravity field even assimilated the role of ordinary stones. The local god territory friar immediately lost his ability to move. He even couldn't struggle, so he was killed by the martial spirit puppet. However, the martial spirit puppet did not leave immediately, but took off the sumi ring from the local monk's finger and put it on his own finger. Then he turned and left to hunt down another local monk. It's so simple to kill a friar in the realm of God. Morong Chanqian could not help sighing when he witnessed the whole process. This is the terrorist power of mountain and river seal. Master, your martial spirit puppet is very human. She knows how to clean the battlefield. She couldn't help sighing the wonder of this puppet when she thought of the action that the martial spirit puppet just saw wearing Shumi ring on her hand. Master. Seeing that Tian didn't answer and didn't drive the golden eye-god eagle to kill local friars elsewhere, she always stared at the martial soul puppet who had just left, showing a thoughtful look. She couldn't help calling again. Ah! Tian promised and took back his eyes. The next moment, he drove the golden eye eagle to fly to another place. The mountain and river seal was released again to suppress a local monk in Washinjing who fled. Shenrun released his flying sword on the eagle's back. The cold light of the flying sword cut the monk into two sections. Although Shenrun is doing it with the help of Tian's mountain and river seal, Tian's mind is not on the mountain and river seal at the moment. Just now, the action of the martial spirit puppet to collect Zumaji shocked his heart. He confirmed that the Wuhuan puppet at the peak of Yuanying territory was indeed the Wuhuan puppet under his control. The Wuhuan puppet under his control was completely obedient to his divine orders. He gave a series of instructions to those Wuhuan puppets, including which were the enemy, which were his own people, the primary attack target, the demon attack target and the main protection task. Arrangements after the battle. He gave all these instructions in detail and added them at any time during the battle. However, among many instructions, Tian never let his martial spirit puppet clean the battlefield during the battle. In such a great war, every minute counts. Sooner or later, Tian has resources. He doesn't need to waste his precious fighters to do these trivial things that are irrelevant to the overall situation. Tian remembers this very clearly. But just now, the puppet of the peak martial soul in Yuanying territory made an unusual claim and collected the Zumaji obtained in the battle, which has never happened before. Just now, Tian tried to feel the divine connection with the martial soul puppet. There was nothing unusual, which made Tian Gang very strange. He also sent several instructions to the martial soul puppet one after another and tried it. For example, he asked him to turn back, raise his hand and turn around in situ. The martial soul puppet did all the same without any delay or error. In that case, Tian kept this matter in mind for the time being. It is urgent to host the war with all his strength first. With the continuation of the war, the scope of the battlefield is expanding. When a large number of high-level monks are killed, those local monks have no courage to fight with monsters and puppets. They ran around one after another. Between chasing and fleeing, the battlefield of this war has expanded to thousands of miles. Looking at the sky, you can see two people fighting everywhere. They are not very dense, but they are scattered everywhere, with great momentum. Tian let go of his mind and covered 1,000 miles. The sixth order golden eye divine carving went from east to west. Where he found the local friars in Washinjing, he drove the divine carving to kill them. On the battlefield thousands of miles away, the golden eye god carving, like a terrible ghost, suddenly appeared here and there. Every time they appear, a local monk in the divine realm will be killed. There is no accident. Even some low-level friars who were lucky enough to get rid of their opponents tried to escape from the battlefield. Tian did not let go. It was just the time for the golden eye eagle to flap its wings. Tian would never allow any local friars to attack or leave. If the golden eye eagle is a ghost, the leaf sky on the back of the eagle is like a murderous god. Where the god of killing refers, the local friars there are doomed to be dead. In addition to Tian, there are a number of murderous gods that also frighten local monks. That is the combination of 13 elders of Shueiyue sect branch and 30 monks of Washinjing branch and Taisho branch. These monks are like a torrent, cutting through thorns and thorns everywhere they go, and their stumps fly everywhere. The division of labor of the 30 monks in Huashan realm was very clear. During the war, the people of Tiangong sect released Huafan stone. When they magnified in the battlefield, suddenly, the monks of Taisho branch or Shueiyue sect branch stepped on Huafan stone and wantonly killed the local monks whose mana was closed by Huafan stone. This method has been tried repeatedly. If you encounter some local friars with low state, you don't have to sacrifice any stone slabs. With their own strength and the magic weapon of half-immortal soldiers, it's natural to chop melons and vegetables. As the battlefield was expanding, sporadic battles were too scattered. Later, the combination of 30 killing gods gradually turned into a scattered combination. One heavenly division of Xinjing Friar, together with one or two disciples of Taisho division and Shueiyue sect division, was still unstoppable. A large number of local friars were killed by these people. The puppets and monsters who lost their opponents' soul flashed and rushed to the enemies in other places. Gradually, the battle groups everywhere showed a situation of fighting more and less. Such a regiment naturally ended the battle in minutes. There are also some monsters and martial spirit puppets who can't even intervene in the war with more and less. They only have to find other enemies everywhere. In a short time of more than an hour, the two sides have changed from a fierce battle between the two sides to a situation in which the Maitreya Palace is cleaning up the remaining enemies. Finally, without much time, the war ended with the complete victory of the Maitreya Palace. There were only endless corpses on the ground, and the lake below was dyed red. Sitting cross-legged on the back of the carving, Tian sensed the battlefield beyond 1,000 miles. He let go of his mind. Yuan Tian's eyes shone through and looked down carefully. Xianran and Morong Chanxian also let go of their thoughts. Situ Juanru, Liao Tungwen and other spiritual friars are also distributed everywhere, looking for residual local friars that may be hidden. At a certain moment, Xianran suddenly flashed and fell down rapidly. Before he fell to the ground, a local monk in Yuanying territory in the pile of dead people suddenly came alive and fled away in panic. In Xianran's hand, the half-immortal soldier's flying sword shot out in a flash, and a cold light flew out and cut between the friar's neck. A head flew away from the body. Your sword light turned out of thin air and turned into a shining sword flower, smashing the Yuan baby from the body. At the next moment, Morong Chanxian, beside Yi Tian, flew down from behind the divine carving and flew to somewhere on the ground. Then the sword light flashed and cut off a corpse. The corpse suddenly came alive, as if pretending to be a corpse, so he wanted to escape. But just move, the sword light has fallen, and the man really became a dead man. The rest of the friars in Washinjing also made some gains. Some local friars who tried to muddle through by pretending to be dead were found one by one and killed. The war lasted more than an hour, but it took 4 or 5 hours to eliminate the remaining enemies, several times the time of the war. Some of the monks who escaped underground or in the lake were also dug up by Yi Tian and the Golden Eye God carving one by one, and the results can be imagined naturally. Yi Tian even expanded the search scope by 1,000 miles and found some hidden local monks. No matter how far away, Yi Tian was too lazy to find them. Generally speaking, at the beginning of the war, local friars would not want to escape directly. When the situation is over, every local friar has demons and ghost puppets staring at him. Yi Tian, Xianran and Morong Chanxian's thoughts covered the whole battlefield, and few people could escape their investigation. In addition, there was a combination of 30 monks in Washinjing, who were also as smart as electricity. According to Yi Tian's estimation, all the local friars who have invaded have been basically eliminated. Even if there are a little lucky escapees, they are absolutely very few. Master, this war is over. Morong Chanxian sighed on the back of the divine carving, watching many monsters taken away by Xianran who left the carving. Within the coverage of the divine mind, there are countless corpses of local monks everywhere. Nieba also led the disciples of the Royal Beast Division to cage monsters while counting the losses of the war. On the battlefield, you can see the corpses of many monsters, but at this time, you can't tell whether they are the monsters of local monks or the monsters of the Maitreya Palace. In such a large-scale war, it is certainly impossible to have no casualties, while the Miluo Palace lost only monsters, martial spirit puppets and friars. This result, Morong Chanxian never thought of when the local monks and soldiers pressed the border. Kill my ancestral star clan. These local friars should end like this. Let's start cleaning the battlefield. Yi Tian glanced at the battlefield and said calmly, "Release the disciples in the magic weapon cave and let them clean the battlefield." With a command from Yi Tian, the many realms that had come over moved immediately. The low-level disciples of Tiangong branch were released. The lower-level disciples of Shueiyue sect were also released. The lower-level disciples of the Maitreya palace were also released. Coupled with the low-level disciples of the Taisho branch, these tens of thousands of people walked on the battlefield more than 1,000 miles away, collecting Shumi precepts one after another like picking up treasure. "Master!" Morong Chanqian suddenly called on the back of the divine eagle. "What?" Yi Tian looked at Morong Chanqian. Morong Chanqian took a long breath and said, "The disciple finally knows how our Maitreya palace resources have been accumulated." Yi Tian smiled and nodded, "In fact, as a teacher has said, but you don't believe it." Morong Chanqian wanted to stop talking, but there was no refutation, because Yi Tian said such words, but she really didn't believe it, at least half believed it. Yi Tian did not continue this topic, but suddenly said, "Old 19, do you know why you want to be a teacher and ask those disciples in the cave to clean the battlefield?" Hearing that Master suddenly asked such a question, Morong Chanqian said in a deep voice, "Does Master want them to see the brilliant achievements of our Maitreya palace?" Yi Tian said, "You're only half right. Let them clean the battlefield, not only let them see this great victory and increase their confidence in the Maitreya palace, but also let them feel the cold and cruelty of the battlefield. The local friars who came to attack the Maitreya palace today should have a lot of festive forces with your Shueiyue sect. With the size of the Rose Spirit domain, these hundreds of thousands of friars are only a few of the practitioners in the Rose Spirit domain. Think about what astronomical numbers of friar in the Spirit domain should be. However, on Earth, in addition to the monks in the Spirit realm, we have to face the underworld and the demon realm. Once I fought with the underworld in the Spirit realm of Luo Tian, I felt the strength and terror of the underworld army. But it's only the underworld of one city. The underworld and the demon realm are far greater than the power of one city. Moreover, as I have seen with my own eyes, the strength of the demon world has almost reached an appalling level. You only know that the human friar, above the realm of God, is the Jade Pu realm. Do you know that there is the Heavenly Palace realm above the Jade Pu realm? Heavenly Palace territory? Morong Chanqian shook his head suspiciously. Disciples haven't heard of it, and ancestors haven't mentioned it. Maybe they don't know? Master has seen monks in Heavenly Palace territory? Yi Tian nodded and said, "I've seen a great power in the Heavenly Palace, named Yanlai. He is the first person of the human race in the great wilderness spiritual realm and leads the alliance of the human race. He is also the sworn brother of the teacher. Master is so powerful that even the great powers in the Heaven Palace worship Master. It really makes the disciples look at him with admiration." Morong Chanqian said in worship. Yi Tian smiled and said, "When I talk about this, I don't want to hear any praise. Just listen quietly. In the wilderness, in addition to the human race, there are also the demon race and the demon race, and there is also an animal race. Although the human race has monks in the Heavenly Palace, compared with the demon race and the animal race, the human race is the weakest." Master, what are you talking about? The human race has the power of heaven, but it is still the weakest one? That doesn't mean that there are strong men with high cultivation among the Ming, Warcraft, and Beast races? Morong Chanqian exclaimed. Yi Tian nodded, "Yes, what you guessed is right. Let's not talk about the demon clan for the time being, just talk about the Ming clan and the demon clan. The first strong person in the great wilderness spirit realm is a guy named Nine Yuming Emperor, and the first strong person of the demon clan is the demon emperor by Xiao. Both of these two beings have the cultivation accomplishments of the human kingdom in heaven. Not only that, there are a large number of lower-level beings of the Ming clan and the demon clan, and their overall strength is very strong. If it weren't for my adoptive brother, it has organized a 10,000 region alliance, so that all Terran forces can eliminate internal friction, unite with the outside world, and the government orders are unblocked. It is possible that the Terran has long perished under the pressure of the three ethnic groups. Master, joining the Maitreya Palace is our active choice, and we think it is the most correct choice. The whole Shueiyue sect branch has benefited a lot from it. the disciples don't have the idea of having to. I've also considered the choice you told me that day. Master, don't worry about it at this time. Hearing Tian talking about this problem, Morong Qianqian said at a loss. Tian nodded slightly and didn't continue the topic. Instead, he said, through what I just said, you should understand the power of the demon and the Ming, and the power of the Ming Emperor and the Demon Emperor. Well, I know, such an opponent is definitely the biggest enemy. Morong Qianqian nodded. Tian looked up at the deep sky, lost his mind for a moment, and then took back his eyes and said, what I want to tell you is that there is a strong existence beyond the Demon Emperor in the demon world. I can't say how strong it is. I can only say it is very strong. More powerful than the devil? Hearing Tian's words, Morong Qianqian was stunned. Master, the Demon Emperor is equivalent to the friars in the heavenly palace of the human race. Doesn't that mean that the strongest existence in the demon world is more powerful than the friars in the heavenly palace? Yes. Tian nodded. This is still the power of the demon world. Even Shifu doesn't know how powerful the ultimate power of the underworld is. However, when you return to the Earth Star, the situation of the Maitreya Palace will be far more dangerous than that of the Shueiyue sect in the Rose spiritual realm. Because here, you only need to protect yourself, and others don't need to be involved. But the Maitreya Palace is different and has to bear the responsibility of defending your home. Shifu, Zuxing is also the home of disciples and the home of all Shueiyue sect disciples. Even if it is dangerous, we are determined to follow Shifu back to Zuxing and fight with Shifu against the underworld and the demon world. The big deal is that we should have already died in the spirit realm of Rose. Morong Qianqian clenched his teeth and said. Tian glanced at Morong Qianqian and nodded with appreciation. Old 19, although you are a daughter, it should be said that it is a miracle that you can lead Shu Yuzong to support in the dangerous Rose spirit field until now. However, Zuxing is really different from here. If you want to defend your home, you can't do it just with a cavity of blood. You also need strength. Without strength, everything is empty talk. Let these disciples clean the battlefield because they didn't see the whole process of the war, but others saw it. War is always cruel, either killing or being killed. If you don't want to be killed, you are desperate to improve your strength. As a teacher, you want to protect your home, but you don't want to follow your disciples to die in the battle one by one. When Tian said this, he stopped a little and looked into the distance again. After a long time, he turned back and continued, so, I poured out precious materials for the teacher and arranged the Tiangong branch to make divine dragon armor and black dragon armor in order to minimize casualties. However, if my own strength is not strong, only armor protection cannot fundamentally solve the problem. The most powerful person in the demon world, as a teacher, will find ways to deal with it, but to tell the truth, it should be very reluctantly. In this case, there should not be too much spare power to take care of other disciples of our sect. I tell you so much because I want you to set off a wave of cultivation after the whole bone cutting and marrow washing of Shueiyue sect branch, so as to drive the cultivation of all branches and disciples of the Maitreya Palace. Because the number of female disciples of Shueiyue sect accounts for the most, and female monks can. Why can't so many male monks? Morong Qianqian stared at Tian and nodded heavily. Master, until now, the disciple really understands your pains. The disciple will do his best to promote this matter. Now there are enough resources, and we are confident that we can do it. Tian nodded with a smile and said, well, it's good if you have this determination. Those fairy jade resources are actually nothing. The reason why you are asked to do this by Shueiyue branch and believe that you can set an example is that as a teacher, you have to provide you with other resources. Shifu said? Morong Qianqian was stunned. Suddenly, he had guessed in his heart. Tian didn't directly answer Morong Qianqian's question, but asked, I smell the smell of spiritual materials in the Watermoon sect of Laoshan. Should you plant them yourself? Yes, there is no grass in Laoshan. The disciples of Shueiyue sect risked their lives to transport soil from the outside world, collect spiritual materials from elsewhere and refine pills by themselves to make up for the lack of fairy jade. Therefore, many disciples of Shueiyue sect died. Morong Qianqian nodded heavily. Tian Dao, in order to make no more disciples die in the future, it is imperative to improve their strength. The first resource support I said was pills. In this world war, hundreds of thousands of local friars were killed, and the pills seized will be massive. I will pour out some pills to Shueiyue sect branch in the distribution of pills. Maybe this is because you are friars Zushing, and I am right to do so because of the only selfishness left. Master. Morong Chanshan's eyes turned red and called softly. He didn't say anything anymore. Yi Tian smiled and waved his hand. The ancients said that it's better to teach fish than to teach fish. Even if you are given more pills by Shueiyue sect, they will be used up one day. In order to ensure sufficient supply of pills, you select the pill masters who can refine pills by Shueiyue sect and arrange them to study in the Taisho branch. If necessary, the masters will personally teach the pill refining skills according to their Dan accomplishments Tao. Master can also refine pills? Morong Chanshan blurted out. After asking, he felt something wrong. He smiled awkwardly and said, "The disciple means that master also has time to practice pills?" He, you know that no one in the world can match the Dan way of being a teacher. Continue to say just now. These selected Dan teachers will not be transferred from the division of Shueiyue sect. After learning, they will be dedicated to alchemy for your division of Shueiyue sect, and the teacher will provide you with the spiritual materials for alchemy. However, in the future, Dan medicine will be included in the resource distribution of the sect, and all Dan medicine distribution will not be due to it because you have your own alchemy master, Yi Tian continued. Shifu. Morong Chanshan heard the speech, called Shifu, and knelt down. Well, get up. Don't be so polite. Let's talk about another resource support. Yi Tian mixed it with his hand and said. Yes, master. Morong Qian answered and sat down again. You are a talented field master of Shueiyue sect. Can you tell us more about him? Yi Tian suddenly asked. When Morong Chanshan heard this question, he looked at Yi Tian unexpectedly, and then began to introduce, this talented field master is not someone else, but the disciple's sister-in-law, named Morong Chuchu. Because he is devoted to studying the field, his cultivation has been relaxed. Now it is only the midterm cultivation of Yuanying territory. What a coincidence! Is your sister's field accomplishment self-understanding or another teacher? Yi Tianlu asked. Morong Chanshan shook his head and said with a wry smile, how can there be any successor? No one of our ancestors was familiar with the way of the field. It was an accident that Shimei got a notebook introducing the field. After reading it, Shimei arranged the field described above directly. That was the time when she was a genius in the field. Then she got out of control and buried herself in the way of the field. She was hungry and forgot to eat and sleep. Prison. The ancestral field of the mountain was created and arranged by Shimei. It is precisely because of those ancestral fields that Shueiyue sect can inherit to today. Yi Tian listened carefully. When Morong Chanshan finished, Yi Tian gestured, took out a jade slip and handed it to Morong Chanshan. This is a method of arranging the time field. You can show your sister. If he can arrange it after research, the teacher will provide her with the spiritual material for arranging the field. Yes, I will do these two things that Master told me. By the way, Master, is this time field a very profound field and what power does it have? Morong Chanshan promised to stand up, but he couldn't resist his curiosity and asked. After this time field is arranged, the time flow rate in the field is different from that in the outside world. It can be understood that in the time field, the time is twice as long as that in the outside world. Do you think this field is magical? Yi Tian said with a smile. It's twice the time outside. Doesn't that mean that life in it has been doubled? Morong Chanshan was stunned again. Yi Tian confirmed and nodded, that's right. Many of our sect's magic weapons caves have been arranged in such a time field. If your sister can understand this field, provide materials for the teacher, and arrange all your magic weapons caves in Shueiyue branch in this field. Before Yi Tian finished, Morong Chanshan had already left in a hurry, and flew to the Imperial Sword where the disciples of Shueiyue sect were located on the bank of the lake. There, the disciples of Shueiyue sect branch had finished cutting bones and washing marrow one after another. What an acute child. Yi Tian shook his head and smiled bitterly. After that, he passed a thought to the golden eye eagle. The wings of the golden eye eagle shook and flew towards the lake bank. One person, one carving, hundreds of miles away, flew to the lake bank and landed on the open space on the bank. Yi Tian's return immediately attracted a lot of eyes, and each face was with an excited expression. The impact of this amazing war on these disciples of the Maitreya Palace is extremely shocking. This war made more people realize the real strength of the Maitreya Palace. The sense of belonging that integrates itself with the Mira Palace is also increasing. Yi Tian, the leader of the Maitreya Palace, a young man with only the cultivation of the golden elixir realm, has become a god among the people. Palace Master. Palace Master. Wherever Yi Tian went, many disciples bowed down and saluted one after another, looking extremely respectful. Looking at the excited disciples of the palace, Yi Tian nodded one by one and finally came to a less crowded place. He took out a magic weapon cave and went in. Sitting cross-legged in the magic weapon cave, Yi Tianxian thought into Zumaji. The next moment, a martial spirit puppet appeared in front of him. This Wuhuan puppet is a very special one among all the Wuhuan puppets at the peak of Yuanying territory he controls, because he wears more than 20 Shumi rings on his hands and 10 fingers. More than 20 Shumi precepts were worn by Yi Tian before he found out that he collected the booty. Later, Yi Tian gave him instructions not to collect Shumi precepts. At this time, Yi Tian swept his hands. From the number of Zumaji, it can be seen that after he gave his instructions, the martial spirit puppet did not collect it by himself. The Wuhuan puppet stood quietly in front of Yi Tian, motionless. The Wuhuan puppet who did not accept the instruction was like this. After observing for a moment, Yi Tian didn't find any difference between this martial spirit puppet. With unsolved doubts, Yi Tian's mind covered the animal soul of the martial spirit puppet, sensing the state of the animal soul. His connection with the animal soul is still close, and he can feel the existence of the animal soul very clearly. The animal soul has no consciousness, and he can't feel the emotional fluctuation of the animal soul. It seems that the animal soul he guessed is unlikely to have independent consciousness. However, why can he automatically collect Zumaji? This situation is absolutely unscientific. Looking at the motionless Wuhuan puppet, Yi Tian pondered for a long time. Suddenly, he gestured, and the original spiritual fire appeared out of thin air. It swept away to the Wuhuan puppet with the terrible high temperature. A scene that shocked Yi Tian appeared. Originally, without his own instructions, the martial soul puppet, which should have been a dead object, suddenly moved. When the fire was about to burn on him, the martial soul puppet suddenly flashed aside and avoided the attack of the original spiritual fire. Yi Tian suddenly got up. Yuan Tian's eyes shone through and looked into the body of the martial spirit puppet. He saw that the gray animal soul in the puppet was slowly beating like the human heart. At this time, Yi Tian gestured again, took out two Wu soul puppets at the peak of Yuanying territory, one left and one by, and clamped the changed Wu soul puppet among them. But strangely, for such obvious prevention, the martial spirit puppet did not have any abnormal reaction. It seemed that he was only particularly sensitive to Yi Tian's original spiritual fire reaction. Yi Tian looked suspiciously at the other martial spirit puppets, and then Yuan Tian's eyes also looked into their bodies. He was surprised to find that even the animal soul in the martial soul puppet was slightly expanding and contracting, which was far less obvious than the previous martial soul puppet. These martial spirit puppets that Yi Tian personally transformed are very clear about the animal spirits inside. They were not like this originally. They were all unconscious animal spirits, like dead objects. The original animal spirits are conscious, but when refining puppets, their consciousness is erased. Otherwise, the martial spirit puppets have the consciousness of monsters, which is definitely a time bomb that makes people uneasy. But now it's different. After discovering this problem, Yi Tian gestured again and summoned more than 100 martial spirit puppets at one time. Yuan Tianyan looked into the bodies of those animal souls one by one. As expected, the animal souls of these martial spirit puppets had changed, expanding and shrinking to varying degrees, but they were not as violent as the one at the beginning. At the next moment, Yi Tian thought again, and the original spirit fire rushed towards one of the martial soul puppets. The martial soul puppet also had an evasive action. Yi Tian's eyes coagulated and silently felt the connection between his mind and the martial soul puppet. As a result, he found that there was nothing unusual. This animal soul has no independent consciousness. If the animal soul has independent consciousness, it will produce all kinds of ideas. As soon as it comes into being, Yi Tian will immediately feel it. This is the advantage of recognizing the Lord. In fact, this situation does not exist. Is it instinct? These martial spirit puppets have an instinct. Seeking good fortune and avoiding evil is an instinct. Yi Tian was not sure, but he knew very well that if the Wuhuan puppets changed, there was only one possibility, that these Wuhuan puppets absorbed and dispelled the vicious Mayfly blood soul. Is it the problem of Mayfly's blood soul? Old 17. Thinking of this possibility, Yi Tian shouted outside the cave. The door did not open the prohibition, just like the ordinary door, the voice spread far away. Master, the disciples are coming. With Situ Juanru's voice, his figure flashed into the cave. Get me a martial spirit puppet refined by Tiangong division. Yi Tian said directly. Yes, Master, Situ Juanru promised, gesturing, and a martial spirit puppet refined by Tiangong sect appeared in front of Yi Tian. Yi Tian asked Situ to leave, but suddenly saw that the 17th disciple was wearing 3 Shumi rings on his hand. He couldn't help laughing. What's the matter? I don't know the truth that money doesn't come out? No matter how rich you are, you can't be so angry. Situ Juanru laughed. Shifu doesn't know. During the war before, disciples killed several friars in Huashan realm and took down Shumi ring and put it on their hands. It hasn't been handled yet. By the way, Shifu, a martial spirit puppet controlled by Shifu also imitated me and put Shumi ring on its fingers. How is this puppet refined? Please teach me. Don't you think I ordered this puppet to take Shumi ring? Yi Tian asked with a move in his heart. How could it be? The martial spirit puppet killed several monks before and didn't move their zumaji until he saw the disciples like that. Situ Juanru shook his head and said. Yi Tianchao pointed to the martial spirit puppet with zumaji on his hand. Do you see this martial spirit puppet? Because the faces of each martial soul puppet are different, Situ Juanru carefully identified it, nodded and said, it's him. There's a red dot in the center of his eyebrow. The disciple remembers it very clearly. That's good. This kind of martial spirit puppet that can imitate others is an attempt being made by the teacher. It's not easy to make too much publicity before reaching the ultimate ideal goal of being a teacher. Leaving you as a martial spirit puppet is also to carry out this experiment. If successful, it will be promoted among the martial spirit puppets refined by Tiangong branch, but this experiment may take a long time. Don't mention it to others, so as not to leak the news. Yi Tianshun said nonsense. Situ Juanru naturally believed it. He hugged his fist and said, don't worry, Master. I'll never tell anyone. I didn't expect that Master not only has great attainments in Dan, but also far surpasses his disciples in refining weapons. Well, don't flatter. Go out and do something. Yi Tian finally waved his hand out. After Situ Juanru left, Yi Tianyuan's heavenly eyes shone through, carefully observed the martial spirit puppet taken out by Situ Juanru, erased the above divine idea brand, and then marked his own divine idea brand. After recognizing it, he took out a zumaji containing the water of the sea of blood in the Tsangming world and sent the martial spirit puppet in. The bloody sea water in Shumi ring is mixed with the elixir to dispel the evil spirit of Mayfly's blood soul. His martial spirit puppet has entered, so he has nothing to worry about. No matter how long it took, he had to find out the reasons for the change of Wuhuan puppets. In the end, it has produced instinct, or has the ability to imitate, or has intelligence, or has the sense of autonomy. Because it matters, there can be no mistake. Walking out of the magic weapon cave, Yi Tian had not had time to put away the magic weapon cave, and a light had fallen in front of him. Old 19. What's the matter? What happened? Have you done what you told? Yi Tian looked at Morong Chanxian, who hurried to him. Shifu. Well, the selection of alchemy disciples has been completed. There are 12 people waiting for Shifu to arrange. I handed over the jade slips in the time field to Chu Chu. After reading them, he said he had learned, but... At this point, Morong Chanshan stopped. But what? When did you learn to speak haltingly? Are you hanging your appetite as a teacher? Yi Tian said with a frown. I dare not. Morong Chanshan quickly hugged his fist and said, it's a disciple. I don't know what to say. Just tell the truth. What's taboo here? Yi Tian glanced at Morong Chanshan and said. The disciple said frankly that the time field is very simple, but there are some shortcomings. If some runes are improved, the time field should be more than twice the time difference. If he is given a little time and resources to experiment, he may succeed. Morong Chanshan simply said directly. After saying that, he thought for a while and continued, Chuchu has been addicted to the field, which may affect his mind and talk boundlessly. It's not convenient for the disciple to take his words seriously, but he thought that in case they were true. So I came to report to the master. Where is she now? Asked Yi Tian with a flash of light in his eyes. Morong Chanshan saw that Shifu was not unhappy because her sister questioned his time field. She immediately relieved. She looked away and replied, Chuchu took the medicinal wine of cutting bones and washing marrow before she came to take a bath. The disciple sent the jade slips to her. The girl looked at it directly regardless of cleaning the dirt. At the urging of the disciple, she was cleaning in the magic weapon cave. Ah, she has come out and is looking this way. Speaking, Morong Chanshan pointed to a cave in the distance. It's her. Yi Tian looked up and saw a thin middle-aged female monk in white. Although she had reached the cultivation achievement of Yuanying realm, she gave people a feeling of weakness. He had seen this Morong and clear in the queue of Shueiyue's sect disciples, but he didn't pay special attention. To tell the truth, he is not used to staring at other nuns. He basically glances at them, but he still has an impression of this person. Master, don't joke. It's clear that you are obsessed with the field and even do cleaning so carelessly. Master, the things in the field. Morong Chanshan said softly. Bring Chuchu here and I'll talk to her. Yi Tian nodded slightly. When Morong Chanshan heard Yi Tian's words, he waved in the distance. Morong, the magic weapon next to the cave, saw the scene here, his body flashed and flew over in the air. Master, I'm afraid of delaying your major events, and Chuchu insists that directly arranging this time field will waste precious materials. She wants to improve it and then arrange it. That's why I came in such a hurry. Whether Chuchu can succeed or not, Master doesn't blame her arrogance. Morong Chanshan knew that Master attached great importance to the layout of this field. After all, it involved the improvement of the overall strength of the disciples of the Shueiyue branch. Master wanted to take the Shueiyue branch as a benchmark because he was worried that Morong's clear time field improvement would eventually fail, causing Master's dissatisfaction. Yi Tian waved his hand and motioned him not to go on, because at this time, Morong Chuchu had come close to them, fell lightly on the ground, flushed and hugged Yi Tian. Disciple Morong, see the palace master. Don't be polite. Yi Tian glanced at the jade slips in his hand. His mind covered the battlefield. It should take a lot of time to clean the battlefield, so he said to Sister Morong Chanshan, let's talk in the cave together. With that, he took the lead in entering the cave. Morong Chanshan took Morong's clear hand, gently shook it, motioned her not to be nervous, and then took his sister to enter the cave behind Yi Tian. Sit down at will. After Yi Tian took the lead in sitting on the futon, he pointed to several futons next to him. Morong Chanshan and Morong Chuchu sat down according to their words. It is supposed that the palace leader Yi Tian asked Morong Chuchu according to his own ideas, and then Morong Chuchu answered one by one according to Yi Tian's questions. This is common sense. Morong Chanshan had told Morong clearly several times before he came. How should he respond if the palace leader summoned him? However, unexpectedly, Morong Chuchu didn't play cards according to common sense. As soon as she sat down, she immediately stood up and said directly, Palace Master, your field is not good. Morong Chanshan was startled and hurriedly pulled Morong Chuchu. Who knows that Morong Chuchu threw Morong Chanshan's hand and said to Morong Chanshan, Sister, this time field is really not good. This arrangement is really not good. It's a waste of materials. Morong Chanqian took a helpless look at Morong Chuchu, stood up and said to Yi Tian, "Master, please forgive the Chuchu's abrupt sin. You don't have to pay too much attention here. As a teacher, you should listen to the clear truth. Sit down and don't talk." Yi Tian can see that Morong Clear may have been addicted to idioms for a long time and don't know the world, but just because of this, what you say and do without affectation shows your original temperament. Maybe if you don't have such a character, may not be able to have too deep attainments in the field. Yes, master. Seeing that Yi Tian had no unhappy expression, Morong Chanqian's only worry dissipated, so he sat back on the futon according to Yi Tian's instructions. "Clear, tell me, where is the waste of materials in this time field?" Yi Tian asked with great interest. "Palace master, the same arrangement of field materials can arrange a higher multiple of time field, but it is used to arrange only twice the time field." "Isn't it a waste of materials?" Morong asked clearly. "Can you tell me how many times the time field can be arranged with the same materials?" Yi Tian asked with great interest after listening to Morong's clear words without any scruples. "I haven't studied this carefully, but my sister told me that if I can arrange this time field twice, the palace master will give me materials and arrange it right away. According to the jade slips, there is no problem in arranging this field, but I can't arrange it right away. I have to tell the palace master about it. Give me a day, I can improve it, and then what can I improve to what extent, there will be results at that time," Morong said clearly. "One day, are you sure you can get results in one day? I also know that this field can be improved. If I have enough time and study it for a year and a half, I am sure to increase this field from twice the time multiple to 3 times. But are you sure you can get results in one day?" Yi Tian said in a deep voice. Morong clearly said the one-day deadline, which really shocked him. "One day is just my conservative statement. My sister told me to be modest and not too full when talking to the palace leader." Morong leaned his neck and looked up at Yi Tian, as if he was extremely conceited about his field accomplishments. "If you improve the field, where do you need to improve?" Yi Tianke said no matter what she said, he wanted to see the facts, so he began to ask questions from the field itself. "Of course, it's from the rune pattern." The disciple said that with the same material, all kinds of materials will not increase, and the number of fairy jade will not increase, so it can only be improved from the rune pattern. Moreover, it can only be improved from the rune pattern. Morong answered clearly. "Then, which symbol pattern do you want to improve?" Yi Tian nodded and continued to ask. He was satisfied with Morong's clear answer, and in fact it was true. All runes and the connections between runes are interlinked. If only a part of them are modified, the field will be extremely unstable, and the temporary power may not be smooth, resulting in the overall collapse of the field. Morong answered clearly. "All the runes?" Yi Tian murmured and repeated. He was silent. After a moment, he asked, clearly, "Do you know how many runes there are in this time field?" "If there are 3,600 runes, the heavenly stem is 1,002, and the earthly branch is 1,002. It is also 1,002 to reverse heaven and earth. If you improve 3,600 runes, you will have to trade space for time when it comes to professional issues," Morong Chanqian talked with confidence. Space for time. Yi Tian stood up, walked slowly in the cave and began to meditate. Morong's clear words really shocked him. The improvement of field runes in his heart is to improve some field runes, not all, but to increase the power of some field runes, so as to realize the change of time flow rate. It is precisely because of this change method that Yi Tian can confirm that it is the limit to increase the multiple of the time field to 3 times at most. And indeed, as he said, if the improvement is successful, it will take at least half a year to a year. But all alone, he even squeezed out the time of cultivation, and it is impossible to spend too much time on the transformation of the field. However, Morong's idea of exchanging space for time is a new and unimaginable idea. He went through the layout of the whole field, including 3,600 field symbols in his heart. If he really followed Morong's clear words, there is really no chance of success. However, the complexity can no longer be described in words, and one day is certainly far from enough. Well, clearly, I'm here to study things to improve. You should be able to see that this cave has arranged twice the time field, and half a day can be used for one day. No one will disturb you here. All disciples of the Maitreya Palace will wait for you for half a day before starting. If you need anything, you can tell me at a certain moment. Tian suddenly stopped and said to Morong clearly. But Morong did not answer, but made a gesture. He took out a stack of thick paper and pen and ink from Zumaji, spread the paper on the ground and began to draw. It's a rune. Tian glanced briefly and recognized what Morong Chuchu had painted. In order not to disturb Morong's clear thinking, he waved to Morong Chanshan and took her away from the magic weapon cave. At the gate of the magic weapon cave, Tian left 6 Wulin puppets at the peak of Yuanying territory to watch the door and walked out into the distance. Next, Tian began to get busy. He called Liao Tungwen in front of him and arranged the affairs of Dan division of Shueiyue sect. He also called Niaba to ask about the inventory of monsters. In this world war, 30 or 40,000 monsters were lost. Most of them were low-level monsters of level 3 or 4, and only a few were level 5 monsters. This quantity is completely within the acceptable range of Tian, and it is lower than expected. After all, the number of local monks has reached 5.6 million, which is also an extremely powerful team. At this time, those disciples who cleaned the battlefield have also returned one after another. Tens of thousands of people cleaned more than 1,000 miles of the battlefield. It can be said that they turned the battlefield upside down. They should not only collect the Shumi ring, spirit animal ring and scattered magic weapons carried by the friars, but also collect the corpses of those monsters. The task is not light. The large vat containing medicinal wine has been empty. The disciples cleaning the battlefield put the spirit beast ring and Zumaji into the vat one by one, which is full of more than a dozen vats. These large tanks are lined up, full of Zumaji. How shocking this scene is. Each Shumi ring has a huge storage space and rich resources. The sum of resources in these more than 10 cylinders of Shumi ring will be a terrible number. The disciples of the Maitreya Palace are excited to think about it. Those disciples who cleaned the battlefield put down Zumaji and stood in line, one by one, as happy as the new year. Tian didn't count the spoils immediately. He didn't stand in front of the big vat until all the disciples cleaning the battlefield came back and said, "These booty are the collective property of the Maitreya Palace." After cleaning up, the leader of the palace will give corresponding rewards to all branches and disciples. Those who make great contributions will be more, while those who make small contributions will be less. Those who make meritorious contributions will be rewarded and those who are guilty will be punished. For more than 100,000 disciples of the Maitreya Palace, the leader of the palace will strictly implement the rules of the palace, not to waste, not to indulge, and clear rewards and punishments. Everyone could understand what he said at the beginning, but when he heard the palace leader say that rewards and punishments were clear, most people were confused. It seemed that this matter had nothing to do with this great victory and counting the booty. But everyone just listened quietly and didn't even dare to make a comment. When Tian finished, he paused, suddenly turned around and looked at the disciples who came back from cleaning the booty. His eyes swept from one face to another and paced from one side of the queue to the other. His eyes seemed to penetrate the crowd from the front row of the queue to the middle of the queue and to the last disciple. Like a review, almost all the disciples of the Maitreya Palace held their heads high, showed high morale, and stood upright like a javelin. "Xian run, take people." Suddenly, Tian stopped and shouted. In the sky above the heads, Xian Run suddenly showed his body shape, and then quickly fell towards one part of the team. He grabbed a disciple in the queue like an eagle catching a chicken. As soon as his body shape floated, he fell to another part of the team. His hand was like electricity and grabbed another disciple. Then he flew to Tian, put the 2 disciples on the ground, saluted Tian respectfully, and disappeared from where he was. This scene surprised the disciples of the Maitreya Palace. However, seeing the 2 disciples shivering, they seemed to understand something. "Do you take it out yourself or let the palace take it out yourself?" Tian asked coldly, looking at the 2 friars in the early stage of the Golden Pill realm. Knowing that the matter had been exposed, they hurriedly flopped down on their knees. "Palace leader, we know we are wrong. We shouldn't be greedy. Spare us this time. Palace leader, we don't dare anymore. Give us a chance." By this time, the 2 men had turned gray and kept begging for mercy. don't you take it out yet? Tian ignored the two people's plea, and two cold eyes shot at the two disciples kneeling on the ground. When they first arrived in the holy demon realm, they chose to join the monks of the Maitreya palace in the valley where there was a war with monsters. Palace leader, I'll take it out right away. One of them said and gestured. 20 or 30 shumi rings had appeared in his hand. His body trembled and held them in his palm. Another disciple did not hold it down, but directly put it underground. Look at the pile of shumi rings, there are 60 or 70 pieces. Tian looked at the Zumaji taken out by the two men. He didn't speak for a long time, but his face was extremely ugly. After a long time, he gently called out, Xianrun. Master, the old slave is here. Xianrun shows up next to Tian again. Xianrun, this time he supervised the battlefield cleanup, did his duty, found the disciples who violated the rules of the Maitreya palace, and recorded a merit. Since then, he relieved the master-servant contract, served as the first law enforcement envoy of the Maitreya palace, and fully supervised the disciples' compliance with the rules and daily behavior of the Maitreya palace. Tian looked at the respectful Xianrun and suddenly said. Xianrun trembled when he heard the speech, and quickly bowed down and said, Master, the old slave is willing to follow the palace master and serve the master all his life. Tian waved his hand, Xianrun, there are only palace masters and disciples in this palace, not masters and slaves. Perform your duties. Yes, palace master, I will obey. Xianrun bowed deeply to Tian and stood aside. Tian looked at the crowd again and then called, Xiao Yunxian, come here together. Yes, master. Xiao Yunxian and the other 19 attendants responded, walked out of the queue and stood respectfully in front of Tian. Xiao Yunxian, from now on, you don't have to pretend to be a squire. The leader of the palace will explain to the king of Lanling in the future. Now the director of the palace orders Xiao Yunxian to be the deputy law enforcement envoy of the palace, and the other 19 disciples are the law enforcement officers of the palace. They perform their law enforcement duties in accordance with the League rules. As long as anyone in the Golden Elixir territory and below violates the League rules, keep evidence and violation files, and follow the League rules, the rules are implemented. The disciples of Yuan Yingjing and above violate the palace rules and report to the palace master in time, and the palace master will personally verify the ruling. Tian looked at the 20 monks in front of him and said word by word. Yes, please obey the imperial master's instructions. Xiao Yunxian and others bowed to one side. At this time, Tian's face eased a little. His eyes swept the whole audience, and his voice said in a low voice, in the Holy Demon Realm, the Town Demon Alliance assisted Muyun City. In the first war, because 6 alliance leaders violated the alliance rules, the master of the palace expelled 1 leader from the alliance, and 5 leaders executed the alliance rules on the spot. Isn't this lesson profound enough? Do you have to cast magic by yourself? At last, Tian's voice and color were fierce and his face was murderous. Many disciples present felt the cold from Tian. Xianrun, according to the League rules, announce the crime and punish it openly. Palace leader, spare us. Spare us a way to live. With the same sentence, the 2 disciples kneeling on the ground cried and climbed to Tian's feet, begging for mercy. With a wave of Xianrun's big sleeve, the 2 people immediately collapsed on the ground and couldn't climb forward anymore. They couldn't even make a sound. Our disciples Duxing and Lu Sanwang violated the 18th law of the 72nd law of the Maitreya palace, embezzled the public property of the palace and executed the execution according to the rules of the palace. Please the law enforcement officer to prepare a file and the law enforcement envoy to sign and execute the execution. Then Xianrun stood in front of many disciples of the Maitreya palace, and suddenly burst into a loud voice. His eyes were cold and murderous. It is completely different from the previous state of trembling when he claimed to be an old servant in front of Tian. Everyone knows that the cautious old servant is gone, and there is a cold-faced and ruthless first law enforcement envoy in the Maitreya palace. Xiao Yunxian immediately took out a jade slip, wrote the story into it, and then handed it to Xianrun. After reading it, Xianrun checked it and gave it to him, leaving his name inside. After returning the jade slips to Xiao Yunxian, Xianrun Ling drank, execution. Among the newly appointed law enforcement officers, 2 male practitioners immediately came over, picked up a disciple who violated the palace rules, came to the open space in front, raised their swords and cut off the heads of the 2 disciples.
Quiet. The audience was silent.
This scene deeply shocked all the disciples, even the high-level monks who changed their spiritual state.
Carry it down and bury it.
Since they love money, their zomaji and their own belongings are all buried.
Tian waved his hand.
The 2 executing disciples reached out and grabbed the 2 bodies and went to the distance. Tian no longer said more about it, but looked at the crowd again. Duan Jingxiu, Hua Ziqing, Lin Lan.
He named 3 disciples in a row. The disciple is here.
The 3 men came out of the team and bowed down in front of Tian. Please tell me.
Tian Gao said, Duan Jingxiu was appointed as the first treasurer to be responsible for the inventory and management of the assets of the palace.
Hua Ziqing and Lin Lan were appointed as the deputy treasurer to assist the first treasurer in handling the affairs within his duties and powers. The captured booty was counted immediately, and the required manpower was used as appropriate.
Yes.
The 3 men promised and retreated to more than a dozen large vats. The rest of us will fix up on the spot, wait until the booty is counted, give a reward, and then set off.
Let's go. Then Tian waved and walked to the lake.
He walked a distance of 6 or 7 along the lake alone, walking and stopping from time to time. From his heart, he didn't want to kill any disciples of the Maitreya Palace. But now the Maitreya Palace is no longer the day when a magic weapon cave wanders around with a group of disciples. The Maitreya Palace has grown to more than 100,000 people.
There are 5 branches alone, and some branches will continue to grow.
The source of disciples in the Maitreya Palace is very complex.
They come from different forces and even different spiritual domains.
As the leader of the Maitreya Palace, he must balance the relationship in all aspects.
The 1,000-mile dike is destroyed in the ant cave.
If there are problems in the powerful Maitreya Palace, people will turn against him. In the end, it will only be a short-term prosperity.
Orders and prohibitions, rules and regulations must be observed, and rules and regulations can be established. Xian run.
In his mind, Tian continued to walk forward. At a certain moment, he called softly.
Master, the old slave is here.
Tian looked at Xian Run and said, as I said just now, you are a person with a position in the Maitreya Palace.
You are the first law enforcement envoy of the Maitreya Palace. You are no longer my old slave.
Xian Run bowed. Master, I am grateful to my master for his grace. My master saved my life. Although I have achieved the spirit subduing skill, my master is trying to bring back my life.
I will give priority to one day in life. I have done wrong before and I am very sorry. But since the moment I followed my master, I secretly vowed to follow my master all my life. I will always follow my master in front of the disciples of the palace. The old slave is the first law enforcement envoy, but privately, the old slave will always be the master's servant. Why do you bother? Tian shook his head and smiled bitterly.
Xianrun smiled and said, maybe it's the reason why there are so many people taking refuge in the master.
But we can't just rely on the tree to enjoy the cool. We have to weed and kill insects in order to make the tree grow bigger. That's the responsibility of the old slave.
Tian looked at Xianrun for a long time and finally shook his head reluctantly. Well, it's up to you.
By the way,
what's the result of Taili's soul search?
Xianrun wrote, I've found the information about the space channel leading to Guanghan spiritual realm. It's in the door of the Almighty sect. Disciples can naturally find it there.
This time, Taili gathered more than 100 large and small forces in the Rose spiritual realm, mainly to rob the palace master's mountain and river seal and martial spirit puppets. Another purpose is to destroy the palace master and Shueiyue sect in order to eliminate future troubles and plunder the female nuns of Shueiyue sect. People have different purposes, and almost all the forces of these more than 100 forces have been mobilized. The Almighty sect is far away from here, more than 6 million miles away, but there is a transmission array to the Almighty sect in a city called Rousseau City 50,000 miles away. This city is the property of the Almighty sect, which holds 5 disciples of the Shueiyue sect.
5 disciples of Shueiyue sect?
Why didn't you tell me earlier? Yi Tian suddenly turned his head and looked at Xian Run. Master, it's like this. The 5 disciples are all male practitioners. They were originally Yuanyingjing practitioners, but now their accomplishments have been abolished. They have been imprisoned in a dark basement in Rousseau City for 50 years. There is no danger in a short time, but they have suffered a lot of torture in the past. And the master is always busy, so the old slave will report to him when he is ready to report. The soul search master, report it. Xian Run whispered. Yi Tian nodded slightly and sent a voice to the distance. After a few breaths, a white shadow came and fell on Yi Tian's side. Master. Yi Tian didn't answer. He gestured again. The 6th order golden eye divine carving appeared in front of him out of thin air. Xian Run, old 19, come up and talk. Morong Qianqian heard the speech, jumped onto the carving back and stood behind Yi Tian. Xian Run stood side by side with Morong Qianqian. Xian Run. Show the way. Yi Tian said softly. Xian Run promised and pointed in a direction opposite the Great Lake, over there. The 6th order golden eye divine carving then flapped its wings and disappeared from its original place. Xian Run, tell old 19, on the back of the divine carving, Yi Tian said to Xian Run. Morong Qianqian looked suspiciously at his master and at Xian Run. Xian Run said, Morong Taoist friend, Shueiyue sect has 5 disciples named Morong Koan, Lu Digang, and Lu Ding. Ah, Xian law enforcement envoy, how can you suddenly mention these people? Morong Qianqian asked in surprise before Xian Run finished saying, they have fallen for many years. They are not dead. I think Morong Taoist friend had never seen a corpse in those years? Xian Run said. I really haven't seen this, but I haven't heard from him for many years. Besides falling. Ah, Xian law enforcement envoy, have you got the news that they are alive? Who are the other 2? Morong Qianqian suddenly woke up and asked in an urgent voice. He could see that he looked very nervous. Yes, they are still alive. The other 2 are Qin Zhong and Morong Jian. Morong Sword. He's still alive, Zuanronggang said. Morong Qianqian suddenly screamed. What? Morong Sword is your close relative? Yi Tian also heard the name for the first time. He couldn't help but turn back and ask, the internal kinship of Shueiyue sect has been like a spider's web. Due to internal intermarriage, many years ago, the disciples of the sect had distant or near kinship. Because even between the same surnames, there may be no close relationship between different surnames. However, hearing the name Morong Sword, Morong Qianqian reacted so much that Yi Tian felt unusual. Master, Morong Sword is my brother, who has been missing for many years. The disciples thought he had fallen, but they didn't think he was still alive. Where is he? Where is he? Morong Qianqian became more and more excited. It's in the city below. At this time, Xian Run suddenly pointed to a dark shadow on the ground in the distance. In this moment, the 6th order golden eye divine eagle has flown 50,000 miles away. Thank you, master. Thank you, law enforcement envoy Xian. So, my brother Morong Sword is locked up in the city by those local monks. Morong Qianqian looked down at the dark shadow of the city and said with his teeth. Before the voice fell, the golden eye statue had fallen on the largest hall in Rousseau. Who dares to break into Rousseau City? Such a big noise has alerted the friars in the city. Under the hall, several figures flash and fly into the air. Xian Run, go to rescue the Taoist friends of Shueiyue sect, and give it to us here. Yi Tian was worried that if he delayed a little, the other party would take the 5 monks as hostages or start on it. He ignored the local monks flying over and directly said to Xian Run. Xian Run didn't even return his words. He directly moved the divine carving and disappeared on its back. At the next moment, Yi Tian's magic weapon of mountain and river seal has been released. It turns into 100 mu area and is shrouded over the hall. There is the suppression of mountain and river seal. I believe the monks here may not be able to do it even if they want to do it. Under the strong gravity field, several friars flying up had lost their action ability in an instant. Morong Qianqian killed these local friars who had reached the cultivation level of Yuanying territory with a flash of sword light.
Then, her body fell and rushed into the hall. She only heard a continuous roar inside, but Morong Chanxian was madly shooting. Tian sat on the back of the divine carving and ignored Morong Chanxian.
He let go of his mind. Tian's eyes shone through.
He saw that Shenrun had escaped into a dark room deep underground, cut off the chain, sent the 5 locked male practitioners to the magic weapon cave, and then returned. Under the cover of divine thoughts, he had found out that there was not even a friar in Rousseau.
The highest level is only the friars in Yuanying territory. In addition to the dead, there are less than 10. It seems that the high-level friars in the city have joined the team of encircling and suppressing Shueiyue's sect. This Rousseau city is really immortal with Shueiyue's sect.
After more than 10 breaths, on the back of the divine carving, Shenrun's figure flashed and appeared on the back of the carving.
Then, under the hall, Morong Chanxian flew back in white. Saved it? Shenrun nodded slightly and looked at Tian. Where is the transmission array? Tian asked.
Shenrun pointed to a place in the distance and said, "There's someone watching in the underground over there.
Leave the people behind. You can guard the transmission array. No one can transmit them until we come back." Tian said decisively.
Yes. Shenrun agreed, gestured, and a cave appeared in his hand. He quickly erased his mind mark and handed it to Tian. Then he disappeared from the back of the carving again. As for the safety of Shenrun, Tian is not worried at all.
There are no high-level friars in Rousseau City. Even if there are, it is definitely not a problem.
His monster army is enough to wipe out 10 cities of this size at one time. Tian handed over the magic weapon cave to Morong Chanxian. The divine eagle flapped its wings and flew back directly. In a moment, the 6th order golden eye divine carving has carried Tian and Morong Chanxian to the bank of the Great Lake. They go back and forth to and from Rousseau City for 100,000 miles.
It doesn't take much time. Even some disciples don't notice the situation here and don't know that they have done a big thing.
He jumped down from the back of the divine carving.
Morong Chanxian's face was a little ugly.
He had no joy in saving his fellow disciples and his brother. On the way back, she had branded her mind in the magic weapon cave, and put her mind into the cave to check the situation inside. As a result, it hurt his heart the magic weapon of the cave fell on the lake bank and the prohibition was closed. Morong Chanxian trembled and pushed open the door of the cave. The sound of gentle footsteps came to Tian's ears from the cave, and then someone spoke weakly.
"Sister. Lord."
Then there was a loud bang from inside, and then Morong Chanxian cried bitterly. The prohibition of the magic weapon cave was not opened, and even the gate was not closed. Not only Tian heard the voice inside, but also other disciples nearby heard Morong Chanxian's cry.
Many eyes looked over here.
In an instant, Tian became the focus of countless eyes. Although he didn't say anything, Tian felt that some eyes had content. He sighed secretly. Fortunately, he didn't follow in. Otherwise, others thought he had made Morong Chanxian cry.
That's not good. Morong Chanxian cries inside. Standing outside will also make people think.
He glanced at the crowd and said in a dignified voice, "Come here, disciples of Shueiyue's sect. He has just rescued 5 disciples who have been missing for many years.
Old 19 is inside. Meet your former classmates."
Originally, the disciples of Shueiyue's sect also noticed the situation here, including 13 elders, but they just stood and watched. No one came, as if they were avoiding suspicion. Hearing Tian's greeting, the people of Shueiyue's sect hurried over and surrounded the magic weapon cave.
Tian walked against the current and out of the encirclement.
13 elders quickly entered the cave, but others were just waiting for news outside the cave. At most, someone lay down at the gate of the cave and looked inside. But soon, the story of 5 fellow disciples spread among the disciples of Shueiyue's sect.
The names of the 5 rescued people were no longer a secret. One after another, friars separated the crowd and entered the cave.
There were bursts of crying again. But soon, all the people were driven out by Morong Chanxian, including 13 elders.
Morong Chanxian didn't stop too much. He went out of the magic weapon cave and looked around. After discovering Yi Tian's figure, he walked over quickly. Master! Morong Qianqian called with red eyes. Many disciples of Shueiyue's sect also gathered around one after another. Yi Tian nodded slightly and asked, "How's the situation?"
Morong Qianqian shook his head weakly. "Their elixir fields are all broken, Yuanying is withered, none of their limbs are intact, they are all broken into several sections, and there must be no hope to restore their mana.
Even the disciples can't do anything about their legs and feet.
The master once said that Dandao is very accomplished. I would appreciate it if I could ask the master to see if they can cure their legs and feet."
With these words, Morong Qianqian would kneel down directly.
Yi Tianxiu helped Morong Qianqian, but many disciples of Shueiyue's sect knelt to the ground.
Yi Tian's body slowly flew off the ground and stopped at a distance of about 1 foot from the ground.
"Please get up, all disciples, and don't cry anymore. It's a small matter that Dantian was abandoned, and it's a small matter that his legs and feet were broken." When he said this, there was silence around him, and many disciples looked up at Yi Tian with different thoughts. Some disciples thought to themselves, "Yes, the palace master meant that everything in the world except life and death is a small thing.
It's good to survive."
Some disciples thought, "Yes, the palace master meant that the body is disabled and the will is not disabled.
As long as there is sunshine in the heart, life is still bright."
Some disciples even thought that the patriarch meant that there were no legs on the body, legs in the heart, no Dantian on the body and Dantian in the heart. This is the highest level of cultivation. Just as everyone's eyes were complex and they guessed the profound meaning contained in the palace master's words, they heard Yi Tian continue to say, "The reason why we say these are small things is because the palace master can cure them."
"Really, master, what you said is true." Morong Qianqian was stunned when he heard the speech, and then a burst of ecstasy appeared on his face.
Yi Tian smiled helplessly. "Old 19, this is the 20th time you have asked me if it is true.
It seems that I always lie as a teacher." Morong Qianqian burst into tears and smiled.
An old lady with hundreds of years old seemed to have become a little girl.
She grabbed Yi Tian. "Master, it's great. Then go in and have a look at the injury." "Don't look, I know." Yi Tian waved his hand. "Can you really cure the injury without looking?"
"Shifu, is this true?"
Morong Qianqian asked incredulously. "Well, as a teacher, I will refine pills now to save you from feeling uneasy."
Yi Tian smiled helplessly, then fell on the ground, looked around the people and said, "All quit 10 feet away, otherwise be careful of Dan robbery and accidental injury."
"Dan robbery?"
Liao Tungwen, who was watching from a distance, immediately called the disciples of the Taisho branch to fly into the air to observe the palace master's alchemy. Yi Tian waited until they were far away, began to take out the Dan stove, selected some spiritual materials from several shumi rings, and prepared a drop of creation liquid. If you want to fully recover from such a serious injury, you have to consume a drop of fortune liquid. The preparation for alchemy is complicated, but once you enter the process of alchemy, Yi Tian's actions are dazzling.
Laymen watch the excitement, while experts watch the excitement.
Disciples who don't know the Dan way can only murmur in their hearts and lie in the trough.
The palace master is so awesome. Wow! The palace leader is so handsome. I love him.
But for elitists such as Liao Tungwen, they are looking at the way of alchemy, the method, the heat and the formula. The second time I looked at Yi Tian's alchemy was completely different from the first time. Because I had a focus, I could be more detailed. Soon, with the continuous progress of alchemy, the disciples of Taisho's sect were deeply addicted to it. Time passed bit by bit. With the continuous release of Danxiang, Yi Tian's expected robbery cloud finally appeared in the sky gradually darkened, and small thunder flickered in the thick red cloud.
Sure enough, it was a pill robbery.
Master said that if there was a pill robbery, there would be a pill robbery.
Doesn't that mean that Master has an absolute assurance that there will be no waste pill, and even the quality of the pill is completely under control? Liao Tongwen's mind fluctuated and was shocked again. As a Dan Master, how can you not refine waste Dan medicine? In the process of refining pills, even a little accident will affect the quality of pills. Who can guarantee that there will be no accident in the process of refining pills?
For example, the strong winds suddenly blew off the Dan fire and reduced the temperature of the Dan furnace. For example, the turning of the spiritual material was a little late, and there was anxiety after a breath and a half.
For example, too much medicine is emitted, which affects Chengdan. There are many accidents like this. Who can take care of them one by one? However, Master has such absolute assurance.
This is not a man, but a god. There was no surprise that the 5 falling lightning robbers were easily broken by Tian. The 5 white lights turned into 5 pills were caught by Tian's cloud photographer. In this case, Liao Tong's tattoo flashed, flew to Tian and looked at Tian's hand.
Tian naturally knew Liao Tongwen's mind.
His clenched fist slowly loosened, revealing 5 crystal clear pills, all of which had 8 eye-catching holy stripes.
Liao Tongwen nodded silently.
The 5 pills were perfect and almost no defects could be found.
Old 19, 1 for each person. After oral administration, rest for half an hour. Tian gestured, and 5 pills flew to Morong Chanshan. Rest for half an hour? Then? Morong Chanshan happily took 5 pills and asked. Tian smiled, then do what you should do.
For example, they haven't walked for many years. You can take a walk with Morong's sword. For example, you can have a good drink to celebrate the narrow escape from death and meet again after a long separation. However, remember, don't use force within 24 hours, otherwise the repaired Dantian hasn't fully reached the best state, which will cause some damage.
That way, Master, I have to refine another pot of pills.
This time, not only Morong Chanshan was stunned. Even the other monks around were stunned.
Master, do you mean that after half an hour, they can walk, and after 24 hours, they can use mana, and their Dantian has been completely repaired? Morong Chanshan asked in a trembling voice. Tian shook his head. That's? Morong Chanshan's heart cooled, and his great hope immediately burst like a soap bubble.
It turned out that Master didn't mean that.
Think about it. If this pill really has such a magical effect, wouldn't it become a fairy pill? But Tian continued, it's not just such an effect. If they can only treat this effect, won't they waste the 5 8-grade pills?
After half an hour, they can not only repair the pill field, but also recover Yuanying, and their cultivation level can also recover to the state when they were abandoned. So, they can make up all the entry delayed for so many years, that is to take this pill, but we still need to refine more pills.
Quiet. After Tian finished, there was silence around him.
If others say this, they will probably scold them to death.
Cow force doesn't blow like this. However, the meaning of saying these words from Tian's mouth is different.
Because what Tian said has basically been realized, even if it sounds very bullshit.
How to say?
At this time, everyone was just half convinced and half suspicious, waiting for the final result.
Morong Chanshan, who was holding the pill, was stunned.
Then he moved and rushed to the magic weapon cave.
Many disciples of Shueiyue branch also followed.
Liao Tongwen pondered a little and just wanted to have a look with him. However, as soon as his body moved, he suddenly found that Tian took out spiritual materials from Zumaji again. His footsteps stopped at this point, came to Tian and asked, Master, what pill will you refine this time?
Tian replied as he moved, it's refining a pill to increase longevity. You can continue to observe it.
Refining pills to increase longevity, some disciples who followed Morong Chanshan to the cave heard Tian's words.
They couldn't help but stop. The next moment, they came back to see Tian continue refining pills.
The pill that can increase longevity Yuan is a magical pill that these disciples have never heard of. Increasing longevity is absolutely different from strengthening the body and prolonging life. Increasing longevity is changing life against the sky and delaying the 5 decline of heaven and man. If you don't increase it for 180 years at a time, I'm sorry to say that it is increasing longevity. Prolonging life belongs to the category of healthcare.
It is exercise and conditioning.
It will not be so embarrassed when the 5 declines of heaven and man come.
The difference between the two is not quantitative, but qualitative. If the palace leader can really refine such anti-heaven elixir, which can delay the decline of heaven and man, doesn't it mean that there is enough life to impact a higher state of cultivation? Is this pill more abnormal than repairing broken legs and elixir fields? Liao Tungwen was also extremely shocked.
He knew that Yi Tian would never joke with him on this, and Yi Tian didn't joke with him on other things. That is to say, what Master said is true. Once he was sure, Liao Tungwen stood in place and stared at the Master's actions, at every detail on his hand, at what spiritual material Master used for alchemy, when to burn the fire, when to stabilize the heat, and when to turn the spirit. He was breathless and his eyes did not blink. He looked at it silently, wrote it down silently and realized it silently. Even at a certain moment, when Morong Chanqian came nearby with 5 monks and a cry of surprise, he just glanced at it in a hurry and didn't have any spare time to see what happened. As time went by, the sky was again covered with thick robbery clouds, and the thunder in the robbery clouds fell again. Master fought against the thunder in high spirits, and then captured 4 pills flying from the Dan stove.
Liao Tungwen saw all this.
When Yi Tian put the Dan stove away, Liao Tungwen unconsciously sat on the ground and entered the state of epiphany. After observing Master's alchemy twice in a row, he felt that his alchemy rose sharply on the original basis, reaching a level he had never dared to imagine before. Not only Liao Tungwen, but also some disciples of the Taisho branch also entered a state of epiphany nearby, sitting cross-legged on the ground and feeling. After Yi Tian made a silent move, he let the disciples quietly retreat to the distance, and left some martial spirit puppets nearby to protect the Dharma.
Master! Morong Chanqian followed behind Yi Tian.
Behind her are 5 water moon friars, such as Morong's sword, who have recovered their ability to move. Yi Tian naturally saw them for a long time.
He recovered and walked as usual in half an hour. This is something he has already confirmed. How? Are you still used to it? Yi Tian turned and looked at the 5 monks and asked with a smile. Thanks to the palace master. He's very kind. I'll never forget it. The 5 friars did not answer Yi Tian's words.
They knelt down in front of Yi Tian almost at the same time and fell to the ground.
The action of kneeling is clean and neat. There is no trace of mud and water.
It can't be seen that the limbs have been broken for many years and have just been cured.
Get up, everyone. If you don't die in a great disaster, you will have a blessing. I will cultivate myself in the future. I am a knife and a fish.
Yi Tianwen said in a voice, holding up the 5 friars with empty hands and a soft magic power.
Master. Thank you. Morong Chanqian said softly. Thank you, palace leader. Thank you, palace leader.
Other disciples of Shueiyue branch also thanked them. It seems that they all look very excited. They should be the blood relatives of the other 4 monks.
Morong's sword.
Before Yi Tian said something polite, suddenly a cry came from a distance, and then a figure flew in the air.
A strong wind flew over Liao Tongwen's head, almost waking Liao Tungwen from his epiphany. Second sister. With a slightly haggard look, Morong's sword greeted him. Where have you been for so many years?
No news came, which made us worry for nothing. We thought you were captured by local friars or killed by local Xiushui.
Look, I won't break your legs today, and see if you dare to do this in the future. Morong's eyes were red and grabbed Morong's sword's arm and wanted to fight. Stop fighting, second sister.
Morong's sword grabbed Morong's clear arm and said with a cry, Second sister, I was really caught by local friars, and my arms and legs have long been interrupted by them.
I just cured it. Please be merciful. Morong has been immersed in the time field in the magic weapon cave without distractions. He doesn't know the whole process of this matter.
Suddenly, Morong's sword, who had been missing for many years, suddenly underlined.
The woman was surprised and happy. She came quickly.
Naturally, her heart was mixed, and a surge of anger rose.
For so many years, Morong Jian didn't know where he had gone. He was such a big man. Don't you know that Shueiyue sect was worried about them?
Such a lively man keeps saying that he was taken away by local friars, his arms and legs were broken, and he has just been cured.
Do you think he is blind? Can't you see if you're lame? Do you still lie?
Morong raised his hand and fell on Morong's sword. At this time, Morong Chanqian shook his head and smiled, and stopped Morong's clear hand with a weak hand. It's clear that what the 3rd brother said is true. His legs and feet have been interrupted for many years, and his dantian has been abandoned and his accomplishments have been lost. If you come half a minute earlier, Morong's sword may not even have the strength to climb to see you. Well. This. Morong was stunned when she heard the speech. If Morong Chanxian hadn't said it himself and in front of so many people around, she couldn't believe what Morong Chanxian said in any case. It was Shifu who refined 5 pills. Morong's sword and the 5 of them took their own hands. All the old diseases were cured. The elixir field has recovered. Even after a little rest, the cultivation can be restored to the original state. Morong Chanxian also suppressed the shock in his heart and slowly introduced it. So magical? Morong's clear and unbelievable eyes swept over Yi Tian, grabbed Morong's sword's arm, rolled up his sleeve and looked carefully. Except that the skin is obviously much paler than others because of the long-term lack of sunshine, there are no scars in other places, just like no injuries. Second sister, it's true. If it weren't for the palace master's rescue, I'm afraid we wouldn't meet today in our whole life. Morong Jian's heart was full of feelings and his mood was very excited. More and more disciples gathered around after hearing the news. Some people came late. They generally inferred the course of things from the scenes in front of them, although they could not know some details from the speculation. Broken arms and legs can be cured in a short time, but they can accept it, even if they have been broken for 20 years. If the pill is magical, it is possible to connect tendons and bones. However, after the destruction of dantian for 20 years, it can not only be completely repaired, but also the cultivation can be restored to the original level. This is absolutely shocking. If so, Yi Tian is not a man, but a god. However, the condition of arms and legs can be verified now, but dantian and cultivation will take some time. Although they didn't say anything, they paid close attention to the situation of 5 disciples such as Morong's sword. Well, the future is long, and you will have to meet in the future. After Morong Chuchu and Morong Jian said a few words, Yi Tian waved and looked at Morong Chuchu. The agreed time has come. How are you doing? Hearing Yi Tian's inquiry, Morong Chuchu's face immediately glowed with a look. He couldn't help but move his hand. A jade slip appeared, 5 times. If the palace master can provide these materials, I'm sure to arrange 5 times the time field. 5 times? As soon as Yi Tian's eyes coagulated, he looked suspiciously at Morong, took the jade slips, and his mind penetrated into them. With reading the contents, Yi Tian's face became more and more dignified, occasionally frowning and meditating, and occasionally silent. The disciples around didn't know what was recorded in the jade slips, so they all waited curiously and continued to wait and see. Until the end, Yi Tian's eyebrows slowly stretched out, exhaled a long breath, flashed in his eyes, looked at Morong and nodded slowly. Yes, it's really a genius field master. The jade slips record 3,600 improved field symbols and the way of generation and derivation between them. In addition, they also list a series of materials for arranging the time field. Based on Yi Tian's insight into the field, he deduced it one by one. He felt that Morong's statement of raising the field to 5 times was not empty. Some of the symbols are so profound that even he has to ponder them carefully before he can understand the essence. Originally, Yi Tian thought that as long as Morong could make a breakthrough in the previous time field and arrange 3 times the time field, it would be a great surprise. It's just unexpected that this surprise came so big, so suddenly, 5 times the time field. It's exciting to think about it. Palace leader, genius is the second thing. I just want to arrange this 5 times time field as soon as possible. Once the arrangement is successful, I can promote the arrangement in the Maitreya Palace. In that case, the disciples of the palace will have 4 times more cultivation time. Morong said excitedly. As soon as he said this, many disciples around him already knew what was going on. Because the existence of double time field is no secret in the Maitreya Palace, but this 5-time field? This field is enough to make all monks crazy. Okay, then meet your requirements and immediately set about arranging 5 times the time field. Yi Tian also said without a movement in his heart. If this 5 times time field can be arranged on a large scale, the strength of the Maitreya Palace will be improved rapidly, and he can have more time to do something. What he needs most now is time. Lin Yichuan.
After saying this to Morong, Yi Tian looked at Lin Yichuan in the crowd.
Palace leader, the disciples are here. At this time, the excited Lin Yichuan stepped out of the line, bowed to Yi Tian and waited for the next article. From now on, Morong Chuchu will be the technical director of the field division, and all the staff of the field division will cooperate with Morong Chuchu to arrange the time field without error.
Yi Tian said solemnly. Yes, please follow the Imperial Master's instructions. Lin Yichuan agreed happily, turned and left the arrangement. As soon as Yi Tianlu pondered, he took out 3 Shumi rings and handed them to Morong Chuchu. There are a lot of precious materials for arranging the field, and take them for use. Let's decorate them. Start with the magic weapon cave. These caves are also given to you.
As he spoke, Yi Tian gestured, took out more than 30 fist-sized magic weapons and handed them to Morong Chuchu.
These are only part of those idol caves. Old 17.
Then Yi Tian called Situ Juanru over, took a huge magic weapon cave from him and gave it to Morong Chuchu. In this way, Morong Chuchu had enough space to arrange the time field even when he was on his way. As for the mobile medicine garden, Yi Tian is not in a hurry.
At least he won't move for the time being when the field layout is not particularly skilled at 5 times the time.
After Morong left with Lin Yichuan, there were slight comments one after another. 5 times the time field was undoubtedly like a bowl of crazy chicken blood, which filled the hearts of countless disciples of the Maitreya Palace with enthusiasm. It seemed that a straight and spacious avenue to heaven had been placed in front of them. As long as they go on firmly, not to mention Yuanying, even Huashan State and Yupu State seem to be waving in front.
The road is not far away, the future can be expected.
Master, all the booty has been counted. At this time, Duan Jingxiu, who was always busy, came over. With his words, a white jade slip was respectfully handed to Yi Tian with both hands.
Yi Tian looked up at Duan Jingxiu. The second disciple who had entered Yuanying territory was full of excitement. At a glance, he knew that the seizure must be expensive.
After taking over the jade slips, Yi Tian examined them carefully.
No wonder Duan Jingxiu was so excited that even Yi Tian was pleasantly surprised. Thousands of resources have been seized, occupying a large space.
Among them, the best fairy jade has more than 360,000 pieces.
There are 2.9 billion ordinary fairy jade.
1.28 million pills of various kinds. There are countless kinds of spiritual materials, magic weapons, refining materials, field materials, and even some precious genius land treasures.
Yi Tian always pays attention to clear rewards and punishments.
He has executed the disciples who are greedy for ink spoils before.
That's punishment.
Now that the booty has been counted, we should reward the disciples who have made contributions. All the disciples who have contributed in the war are rewarded according to the size of the contribution. Naturally, the greatest contributions were those disciples who took part in the war in person, followed by those who took part in cleaning the battlefield and counting the spoils.
Even Yi Tian won the prize to the disciples of Tiangong branch and Taishiu branch.
During this period, Tiangong branch kept refining all kinds of magic weapons, while Taishiu branch provided corresponding pills, which made the refining of magic weapons progress very fast. More than 8,000 martial soul puppets played a great role in the war. Naturally, Yi Tian also gave a lot of rewards to the division of Shueiyue sect. As a member of Shueiyue sect, Morong clearly studied the 5 times time field. Although it did not play a role in the war, it will definitely be the absolute treasure of the Maitreya Palace in the future. This alone is enough for Yi Tian to give a heavy reward, not to mention that Morong Chanqian and the elder of the 13 Shueiyue sect division personally participated in the war and killed countless enemies. Because the reward is too much, too heavy and too wide, this link came to an end after more than 2 hours. After the reward ceremony, Yi Tian gave an order and many disciples took action one after another. Because Shen Run was in Rusou City, his magic weapons were carried by Morong Chanqian, Situ Juanru and Liao Tungwen. More than an hour later, Yi Tian collected all the magic weapons on the ground into Shumi ring. Then he moved and called out the golden eye divine carving.
Give you. Increase your longevity yuan.
As soon as the priest appeared, Yi Tian threw a previously refined pill at the golden eye. The golden-eye god eagle screamed excitedly, took a big mouth, swallowed the pill into his stomach, vibrated his wings, flew all over the sky like lightning, and landed steadily beside Yi Tian. The huge carved mouth rubbed against him a few times, which was very close. Don't worry, you don't have the conditions for shape transformation. After a period of time, your strength will be improved, and then you can refine the shape transformation pill. Yi Tian patted the carving neck and said, Gaga, Gaga. The golden-eye divine eagle calls again to express the excitement in his heart. Go! Yi Tian smiled and stepped on the back of the golden-eye eagle. The eagle fluttered its wings, disappeared from the original place, and cast its heavenly wings to Rousseau City. Within minutes, Rousseau was in sight. Previously, the situation of Rousseau City had been fully mastered in Yi Tian's mind, but when he looked at it, he couldn't help laughing. I saw around Rousseau City, surrounded by countless monsters, tightly sealed off the city. At the location of the transmission array, there is also a group of high-level monsters guarding it. Master. Seeing Yi Tian's return, Xianrun suddenly appeared from somewhere and flew to the divine carving, because at this time, except for the golden-eye divine carving, Yi Tian was the only one, and Xianrun still used the previous title. How's the situation? Yi Tian nodded slightly, glanced at the city and asked. Report back to the master. The transmission array has been emptied within 1,000 feet. All the local friars in Rousseau are trapped in the city. The old slave didn't dispose of it without authorization, waiting for the master to come back and make a decision. Xianrun said respectfully. Well done. Yi Tian threw a jade bottle to Xianrun. These are 2 pills refined not long ago, both of which are 8 pills to increase longevity yuan. After taking them, you can not only make up for the lost longevity yuan, but also prolong life. Thank you, master. Xianrun's face showed an excited look, reached for the jade bottle, took out a pill and put it into his mouth. Don't be so polite. Your performance has been very good all the time. I will naturally fulfill my original promise. The next step is to refine the pill to break through the jade territory. You should be ready for the breakthrough. Yi Tian said with a smile. Yes, the old slave must live up to his master's love. Xianrun bowed down deeply. Yi Tian gently waved his hand, then motioned and took out a magic weapon cave. The magic weapon cave was directly magnified in the air and suspended over Rousseau City. Morong Chanqian came out of the city in the eyes of countless local monks. Master. Morong Chanqian saw the situation of Rousseau City and already knew Yi Tian's mind. Sure enough, Yi Tian said directly, Old 19, Morong's sword has been imprisoned here for 20 years. Only 5 of them have the most decision-making power. Leave this power to them. Thank you, master. Morong Chanqian nodded again and again. She knew very well in her heart how painful it would be to be imprisoned in the dark hell for 20 years, and how much hatred accumulated in her heart. She glanced coldly at the local friars in Rousseau, gestured continuously and released 2 magic weapons. Among them, 13 elders of Shueiyue sect branch came out of one magic weapon cave, while 5 disciples such as Morong's sword came out of the other magic weapon cave. Seeing the familiar city in front of them, 5 disciples, including Morong's sword, showed a look of pain in their eyes. When they were once imprisoned in this Rousseau city, in order to torture them, they were not only imprisoned in the dark dungeon. Every once in a while, the local friars would bring out the 5 of them to humiliate, and do their best in front of many indigenous people in the city. Every time, Morong Jian and others wanted to die immediately to avoid being humiliated, but the local friars were cruel and didn't even give the chance to die. The so-called feud of local friars is nothing but the accumulation of weight in the hearts of Shueiyue sect disciples. Cold water turns into ice day after day, and they have endless hatred for those local friars. At this time, he flew over Rousseau City and changed his role. Overlooking the local monks who had humiliated him countless times below, he was like a lamb to be slaughtered. The fire of hatred in Morong's sword and others was not reduced because of the unbearable performance of the other party, but burned more and more. 5 people, including the palace master and disciples, are better off living than dying in this city. All the suffering is given by the people of this city. If it weren't for the rescue of the palace master, we wouldn't know how many years we would be abused here. This hatred is deeply buried in our hearts. Please allow the disciples to take revenge. Suddenly, Morong's sword's eyes turned red and looked at Yi Tian, as did the other 4 disciples. His eyes turned red, and even his body trembled slightly.
Yi Tian nodded slightly and said, "Call you out. That's what I meant. Just let go and do it." "Thank you, Palace Master." Morong Jian and the other 4 monks bowed down to Yi Tian.
"Third brother, you haven't been taking pills for a long time.
It's not appropriate to use magic power for the time being.
The disciples of Shueiyue's sect will take revenge."
To say hatred.
Which disciple of Shueiyue's sect doesn't have a bitter hatred with the local friars, and whose relatives didn't die at the hands of the local friars? Morong Qianxian said here. He nodded slightly to the 13 elders of Shueiyue's sect branch. The 13 elders immediately understood, gestured and took out their magic weapons from the cave. Thousands of disciples of Shueiyue's sect came out and stood over Rusou City, overlooking the local city of monks. The local friars in the spirit region of rose, because in the future, today's fruit, how you treated us foreigners, we will treat you today.
Come. Pay the debt.
Morong Qianxian stood in front of the crowd and shouted at the bottom. Then he waved his sword and took the lead in diving down. Behind him, 13 elders of Shueiyue's sect followed closely, and behind them were some Shueiyue's sect disciples in Yuanying territory and Jindan territory. The momentum of nearly 10,000 people was murderous, like heaven's soldiers and generals, shooting down into the city.
We fought.
Suddenly there was a loud drink in the city, and then a figure rose from somewhere in the city and met Morong Qianxian. Almost at the same time, people left the ground in different directions of Rusou City and rushed to the disciples of Shueiyue's sect with magic weapons.
Come on. Morong Qianxian drank again.
The half-immortal soldier flying sword in his hand had turned into a sword light and shot away at the local friar.
The sword light was like an unimaginable light. It just flashed and came to the friar.
Then the sword light flew by. I saw that the friar's head had been separated from his body, splashing bright red blood and falling to the ground. Morong Qianxian played his sword and pinched his fingers. The flying sword turned in the air and turned into a terrible sword flower. It seemed to stir at will, but it directly stirred the Yuan baby out of the monk into pieces. The local friars had only the accomplishments of Yuanying territory, but how could they be Morong Qianxian, the enemy of the powerful in the later stage of Huashan territory? There was a great war on the lakeside, and almost all the strong in Rusou City came out. At this time, only a few of the friars in Yuanying territory existed in the city master, and the rest of the friars were not worth mentioning. They were vulnerable to many friars in Shueiyue's sect.
People shot up in the sky.
Some of the disciples of Shueiyue's sect killed in the air, while others wanted to escape Rusou City and fled in all directions outside the city.
A massacre began.
Under the leadership of Morong Qianxian and 13 elders, the disciples of Shueiyue's sect swept through the local friars who came up to face the battle. Screams sounded from time to time, sword shadows and blood light rose one after another, and many figures fell towards the ground under the city. Those local monks who wanted to break through encountered many high-level monsters when they were about to cross the city wall. The monsters that covetously surround the surrounding walls have already received Shenrun's instructions.
The local monks in the city will stay in the city honestly.
They will not take the initiative to attack.
But once you take action, you want to break through the wall. So,
sorry, no matter you are a man or a woman, an old man or a child, as long as you are two-legged, you can't get out of their eyes. Of course, more than two-legged people, four-legged, five-legged, even a 100-legged centipede, is no exception. Every living thing in the city is within the range of resistance.
The battle. No, it's a massacre. It's going on in the city, everywhere, in the direction of the wall. There were cries everywhere in the city. Screams, come on. Don't you want to destroy our Shueiyue sect all day? Don't you want to kill us foreigners? Come on, what's the matter? Don't you have the courage to fight? Do you know today? Blood debt. It should be paid with blood. Can't you imagine that we also have a chance of revenge?
Sword light and sword shadow, a knife a drink, a sword a shout. The disciples of Shueiyue's sect are happy to vent their hatred. They are demanding to repay their blood debts. Tens of thousands of monks in the city seem to be in large numbers, but they can't resist the crazy revenge of the disciples of Shueiyue's sect, even if they want to die together. Nearly half of them died in the breakthrough and were torn to pieces by those monsters. The other half died entirely at the hands of the disciples of the Shueiyue sect branch. With the passage of time, more than an hour later, the sound of fighting gradually disappeared, and peace gradually returned to the city. Finally, after the last local monk who tried to resist was killed, Morong Qianqian and others finally stopped.
Her mind covered the whole Rousseau city, searching for the friars with the above accomplishments in the golden elixir realm. A moment later,
Morong Qianqian and several other elders of the Shueiyue sect branch moved and turned into a virtual shadow to rush in different directions in the city. Once again, people in the city flashed, and some hidden local friars rose up in the air, trying to escape from heaven after being found. However, under the strong resistance, all the local monks did could only be in vain. After a brief attack and killing broke out in some places, Rousseau returned to calm again. Morong Qianqian and the elders stood still in the air for a moment, and finally determined that there were no local monks above the golden elixir in the whole Rousseau city, so she took them back to Tian.
Master, stop here, old, weak, women and children. We didn't move. As long as we didn't take the initiative to attack, we didn't move the friars below the golden elixir territory. Now clean the battlefield? Good.
Clean it quickly, and all the things you get belong to your Shueiyue sect branch.
Tian nodded slightly, satisfied with Morong Qianqian's sense of propriety.
Morong Qianqian promised to ask the disciples of Shueiyue sect to fall on the ground, quickly clean the battlefield and collect the cultivation resources of local monks. After more than an hour, all the disciples returned one after another and returned to the magic weapon cave again. At this time, only Tian, Golden Eye Divine Carving and Xianrun are left. Master, this way, please. Xianrun's mind moved, summoned many monsters from the outer wall, received them in the spirit beast ring, and then bowed to Tian.
Tian put away the Golden Eye Divine Carving.
One by one, they followed the underground passage of a main hall to a spacious underground secret room, where the transmission array to the Almighty Sect was located. Standing in front of the transmission array with complex symbols, Tian observed silently for a moment. Then he gestured and encountered mana somewhere in the transmission array. The rune on the transmission array flickered several times and lit up again and again.
Tian's eyes flashed and looked at the bright rune.
Master, it seems that the transmission array here is intact. Xianrun glanced at the transmission array and said that although he has limited knowledge of the way of the field, he still has some basic common sense. Tian nodded and said softly, "It's strange that not only the transmission array here is intact, but also the transmission array on the other side of Wanningsong is not damaged at all. It's reasonable that the news in Rousseau City will reach the Almighty Sect, and they have enough time to destroy the transmission array, but in fact, the other party didn't do so."
Did the other party deliberately leave this transmission array and set up an ambush there?
Xianrun said in a deep voice.
Tian frowned slightly and said, "We don't rule out this possibility. There is another possibility that the other party really doesn't want to destroy the transmission array. This kind of long-distance cost is expensive. Destroying it is a huge loss for the Almighty Sect. If you want to repair it after destruction, it must cost a lot of money and time. However, you will know the specific reason immediately." As he spoke, Tian gestured, and 4 Wuhuan puppets at the peak of Yuanying territory appeared in the transmission array. After thinking about it, he summoned a 4-star heartworm, stirred his wings and landed on the shoulder of a Wuhuan puppet. "Let them take the lead." Tian murmured and put down a pile of Huafan stone tablets in the transmission array. The next moment, he shot out with a mana and hit a rune in the transmission array.
The shining transmission array rune hummed and vibrated for a few times, and suddenly burst into a dazzling strong light. Then the 4 martial spirit puppets and the heartthrob disappeared from the dazzling strong light in an instant. At this time, Tian has focused on the picture brought back by the heartbug in his mind. A chaotic streamer color returned, which was a normal phenomenon in the transmission process of the transmission array. Then, the picture in Tian's mind suddenly lit up, and 4 martial soul puppets appeared in a spacious and bright hall. Almost at the moment when the Wu Soul puppet appeared, two sword lights suddenly attacked the Wu Soul puppet, very fast, like a flash of light. However, the next moment, under the influence of Huafan stone, the two streamers were lightly hit by the Wu Soul puppet, and the two figures after the streamer were cut in half by the Wu Soul puppet. No matter what the state of these two friars is and how strong they are, under the suppression of Huafan slate, they have only become mortals, and they are simply vulnerable in front of the martial soul puppets. Tian looked at the picture in his mind without expression. Until he waited for more than 10 seconds, he still didn't see any other local monks. Only these two? Tian could not help frowning. Judging from the speed, the two local friars should be the cultivation of transforming the divine realm, but as a large door of Rose spirit realm, they should not only arrange these sneak attacks. Let's go and have a look. Lianqin insect flew around the hall and didn't find any danger. Tian said to Xianrun and stepped into the transmission array. After a burst of transmission, Tian and Xianrun passed through the transmission array and entered the hall shown in the picture in their mind. On the spot, Tian immediately sensed that the hall was deep underground, and Yuan Tian's eyes shone through it. He could see dozens of feet above the ground, all kinds of pavilions and halls, but he didn't see a person. On the ground is a vast architectural community. In addition to using Yuan Tian's eyes, Tian's mind also felt silently. Similarly, no human trace was found. Almighty Sect is an empty city. Tian frowned and looked at the two bodies on the ground. Both of them were dressed in Chinese clothes, blonde hair, and blue eyes. Yuanying was broken. They were too dead to die again. Xianrun motioned at this time, summoned the Zumaji in their hands and respectfully handed it to Tian. Master, these two are two elders of the Almighty Sect, one is Fidelan and the other is John's. They have an extraordinary status in the Almighty Sect. They are all spiritual cultivation. Xianrun searched the soul of the Almighty Sect leader Tarlai, knew everything about the Almighty Sect, and recognized the identities of the two people at a glance. Tian nodded slightly, quickly branded the two Shumi rings with divine thoughts, and then checked the items inside. After careful inspection, Tian frowned. As an elder of the Almighty Sect, there are many natural resources in it, but these can't arouse any interest of Tian now. The doubt in his heart is that Nuada is a universal sect. Where have many disciples gone? He didn't find any clues in the Zumaji of the two universal sect elders. Unfortunately, the four martial spirit puppets were too cruel at that time, and none of the two elders lived. Now it's too late to search for souls. Xianrun, lead the way ahead and go directly to the space channel leading to Guanghan spirit region. Tian said to Xianrun after greeting the four martial soul puppets to his side. At this time, Xianrun took back to check the external thoughts, quickly responded, came to a place in the hall, and a spell burst out and hit a wall stone with a slightly different color. A dry sound came from the wall. A gap slowly appeared on the wall that seemed not to be complete and smooth. Finally, with the continuous movement of the wall stone, a dark hole appeared on the wall, and a stone corridor extended obliquely upward from the hole. Xianrun sensed the corridor, nodded to Tian and took the lead in moving forward. Although there was no mechanism in his memory, the situation was different now. He didn't know whether the people of the Almighty Sect would do anything in the corridor. As a slave, he naturally had to go ahead of this possible danger. As soon as the Huafan stone plate on the transmission array was collected, 2 or 3 feet apart, Tian walked behind Xianrun, and then there were 4 Wuhuan puppets in the later stage of Yuanying territory. Even the heart-connecting worm was directly collected by Tian. As Tian's mind becomes stronger and stronger, in general, the heart-connecting insect can't play too much role. Only under special circumstances can this strange spirit insect play an unexpected role, just like this transmission. No matter how powerful Tian and Xianrun's mind is, it is impossible to observe the situation on the other side of the transmission array millions of miles away by virtue of their mind alone, unless the transmission array on the other side is within the reach of their mind. The corridor was straight at the beginning. After walking out of a distance, there were twists and turns, but there was no danger. It was always calm when it came to the ground. There is no one. Xianrun checked again, shook his head gently, and then pointed to the distance. Master, the space channel is at the top of the mountain. Yi Tian covered the past with Shenron's direction and found that the mountain peak Shenron referred to was a bare conical stone mountain, about 10 miles away from here, wide at the bottom and narrow at the top, and the clouds and fog at the top of the mountain transpiration. Under the clouds, you can see that the top of the mountain is hollow, like a crater. There is gray fog rolling inside, and there is a rumbling sound from time to time. This kind of sound is irregular, with varying intervals. Even the stone mountain occasionally vibrates to varying degrees, as if the crater could erupt red and hot magma at any time. At the next moment, Yi Tian suddenly heard a light sigh. His body shape moved, and he had come to the top of the mountain. His eyes were staring at a square stone standing at the mouth of the peak. I saw a line of writing engraved on the square stone: "Foreigners, we are waiting for you in Guanghan Lingyu." Master, this space channel is extremely unstable and seems to collapse at any time. Shenron looked at the handwriting on the square stone and felt the rumbling crater. Yi Tian nodded gently. Yes, this space passage is indeed very dangerous. I'm afraid that the entry of the Friar of Yuanying territory will cause the disorder of the power of space and lead to the collapse of the space passage. It's strange that the people of the Almighty Sect didn't destroy this space passage, and left such handwriting. Master, I think it should be the people of the Almighty Sect who want to lead us to the Guanghan spirit region. Shenron said in a deep voice. Yi Tian nodded slowly and said, this possibility is not ruled out, but the space channel can be maintained to the current state, which shows that even if someone enters the Guanghan spiritual realm through the space channel, there are no friars above Yuanying territory. It is certain that those friars above Yuanying territory have fled elsewhere. However, we can't take them into account now. If you want to eliminate them easily, you might as well do it once. Just be full of spirit, we don't have to waste too much time looking for them. Let's get ready to go through the space channel. Yes, the old slave obeys the master's arrangement. Shenron didn't say anything more, but directly bowed down to receive the order. Yi Tian gestured and took out several magic weapons in succession. With the enlargement of the magic weapon cave, Morong Qianqian, Liao Tongwen, Situ Juanru and other Ganhua Shenjing disciples came out. You see, this is the space passage to Guanghan spirit region. As everyone came out, Yi Tian pointed to the rumbling gray clouds and said. They stared at the space channel, looked at each other and looked at each other. Master, I've heard that the space channel here is very unstable before, but I didn't expect that this situation has come. A careless space channel is likely to collapse. At that time, if it is not crushed by the force of space, it will fall into the vast void and drift in the void again. Morong Qianqian said with some concern. Moreover, I'm afraid that if the Friar of Yuanying wants to pass through the space channel, the probability of danger will be very high. Even if it is placed in the magic weapon cave, it is impossible to avoid the crushing of the power of space. Morong Qian continued. What Lao 19 said is true. This space passage is really dangerous. Liao Tongwen nodded. Sima Juanru and other elders of Washenjing also nodded silently, with a worried look on their faces. It doesn't matter. I have made some preparations for the fragility of the space channel. I call you out not to decide whether to pass through the space channel, but to make some necessary preparations for passing through the space channel. Yi Tian waved his hand and said. Master, what can I do? Morong Qianqian asked curiously. Yi Tian gestured and released hundreds of martial soul puppets in the later stage of Yuanying territory, closely protected the entrance of the space channel, and then pointed to the foot of the mountain. Come down the mountain with me to prepare. With that, his figure flashed, disappeared from the original place, and when he reappeared, he had come to the open space under the stone mountain. Morong Qianqian and others looked at each other suspiciously, but no one said anything. They also flashed. The next moment they had come to Yi Tian. Old 17, take out all the stone slabs. Including others? Yi Tian looked at them and said. Situ Juanru and others acted suspiciously and took out the Huafan stone plate and Shumi ring one after another, because during the Lakeside War, this sharp weapon that can suppress local mana was distributed to the monks in Huashan realm. Once they met a strong enemy, they would use the Huafan stone plate to suppress each other's mana, and then strike with a thunderbolt. This method is often unexpected. When the local people were caught off guard, the mana was suppressed, and then there was only one share to be slaughtered.
Ah. I see.
Shifu wants to use this kind of Huafan stone to suppress the mana of many high-level disciples, whether Yuanying realm or Huashan realm. When there is no mana, it naturally looks like an ordinary person and will certainly not have any impact on the space channel. Shifu's method is really another way to make people admire. A pile of Huafan stone plates were taken out. Take it, Situjuanru said suddenly.
Yes, that's what I think of as a teacher. Yi Tian smiled and nodded.
His eyes were full of water.
Old 17 reacted faster and could guess his intention.
Looking at nearly 1,000 Huafan stone slabs taken out, Morong Chanqian thought for a moment and said with a puzzled face, Master, we have many disciples in the Maitreya Palace.
All the caves add up to 700 or 800.
Although the Huafan stone tablets are magical, I'm afraid the number of Huafan stone tablets is insufficient if we want to put all the Huafan stone tablets.
What's more, there are so many demons above the 5th level. Demons with too high level will also cause the space channel to collapse.
Old 19, you don't have to worry about this. We can gather all the high-level friars, all the high-level monsters, and use the Huafan stone plate. Even if the master still has the Huafan stone refined, there will be no such problem, Situjuanru said with a smile.
No, it's not safe.
If there are disciples or monsters to break through the realm when passing through the space channel, it will bring hidden danger.
Even if the possibility is very low, we don't take risks.
The idea of being a teacher is that all magic weapons, caves and spirit beast rings are sent to Huafan stone or Huafan stone plate.
This is the safest way. Yi Tian waved his hand and said decisively. Do we have enough Huafan stones? Situjuanru was stunned when he heard Yi Tian say this.
You know, as Morong Chanqian said, there are 600 or 700 magic weapon caves, each of which has a vast area, and Yi Tian has left a lot of Huafan stones to the demon-cutting alliance in the Tianbao spirit domain.
Situjuanru was worried about this.
Hearing the speech, Yi Tian laughed and said, you don't have to worry about this.
Let alone 700 or 800 magic weapon caves.
Even if there are 10,000 magic weapon caves, the Huafan stone in the master's hand is enough.
Now start to release all the magic weapon caves. Each magic weapon cave will be sent to Huafan stone without any omission.
Moreover, all disciples must put away their treasure clothes, otherwise the function of Huafan stone will be useless. This is the top priority.
Master said it very well.
The disciples ignored this problem.
If no master was careful, the consequences would be unimaginable, Situjuanru said heartily.
Even Morong Chanqian and Liao Tungwen almost broke out in a cold sweat.
They ignored this problem. So, some mistakes can't be made. After making them, you may not even have the chance to correct them.
Yi Tian glanced slowly at several disciples and said in earnest.
This expression and tone seemed extremely inconsistent with his age. I see.
The disciples have been taught, Situjuanru promised and bowed down, as did the other 2 disciples.
Everyone get Huafan stone. Let's do it now.
Be careful not to miss any cave.
Yi Tian looked at the people again and said solemnly.
Then he gestured, and nearly 1,000 Shumi rings appeared on the ground, piled up a big pile.
These are all Huafan stones? Morong Chanqian couldn't help looking at such a pile of Zumaji.
Not only she, but also other Washanjing disciples showed a shocked expression. Except for the disciples before Yi Tian, no one knows how many Huafan stones Yi Tian has, including Liao Tungwen and Situjuanru.
Each Shumi precept has a huge space.
If the more than 1,000 Shumi precepts are really Huafan stones, this number is shocking enough. You know, how many Huafan stone slabs can be refined with so many Huafan stones? With these Huafan stone slabs, supplemented by Baoyi, the strength of the Maitreya Palace has been greatly improved in the hearts of everyone again. Looking at the expressions of the people, Yi Tian nodded and said, yes, here are all Huafan stones, which are one of the most important cards in the Maitreya Palace. You must not waste anything. Old 17, now you should know how difficult it is to arrange your task of refining Huafan stone plates for the teacher.
Okay. Disciples are not afraid of difficulties.
With so many stones, it seems that the speed of refining treasure clothes will also be accelerated. Master, disciples have a hunch that the future Maitreya palace will sweep all heaven in all regions, and no force or even any spiritual region can compete with the Maitreya palace, Situjuanru said with pride and confidence.
That depends on your ability. Yi Tian gently kicked the ball back and looked at the people with a smile.
You must live up to Master's high expectations. Live up to the high expectations of the palace master.
All the people in the audience spoke angrily and began to receive Zumaji. Everyone carried a number of magic weapons in the cave.
They found a spacious place, released their disciples and put Huathan stones into the cave according to Yi Tian's arrangement.
Yi Tian himself was not idle. He also had many magic weapons on his body.
He also released them one by one and arranged his disciples to put Huathan stones into their own cave and spirit beast ring.
For a while, 700 or 800 caves occupied a large area in the almighty sect, and the scene was spectacular.
After being busy for a long time, Yi Tian felt the last magic weapon cave and spacetime tower in Shumi Ring, and finally took out the magic weapon cave, but the spacetime tower remained in Shumi Ring.
In the spacetime tower, neither Ir nor Qin Luo can reach Yuanying territory in a period of time, which is no surprise.
But in that magic weapon cave, there are 4 female nuns such as Gu Shangjuan. When killing the demon family king's court in the Holy Spirit domain, Yi Tian released them from the magic weapon cave at their request, so that they could see how powerful the demon family was. Then, under the gaze of the 4 people, Yi Tian took the disciples of the Maitreya palace to kill the 4 sides, completely shaking the 4 women. After exterminating the demon family king's court, Yi Tian also made use of the magical effect of Ice Lotus to restore the memory of the 4 women. It turned out that except Gu Shangjuan, the other 3 women were talented disciples of small families and small sects in the time and spirit domain. Because of the recovery of their memory, they remembered that the domineering behavior of the 8 sects in the time and spirit domain had been terrible in the ghost domain, but they didn't think much about returning to the time and spirit domain. And staying in the holy demon realm is also dangerous.
As soon as the 4 nuns discussed, they asked Yi Tian to take them away. But that's all. They didn't explicitly join the Maitreya palace, but just sheltered temporarily.
Among all the monks who came out of the cave, these 4 nuns have no direct relationship with the Maitreya palace.
After the magic weapon cave was enlarged, Yi Tian stepped in.
Ah! Yi Daoyu, I haven't come in for a long time. What's the situation outside now and where are we? Hearing Yi Tian's footsteps, the figure of a room in the cave flashed.
Gu Shangjuan came to Yi Tian with a gust of fragrance.
Almost at the same time, the other 3 nuns also showed their shapes.
Yi Tian looked at the 3 people.
When they first entered the magic weapon cave, they were all in the later state of the golden elixir realm. After wandering in the void for a long time, each of the 4 entered the realm and all entered the peak state of the golden elixir realm. Although it is with the help of the light in the field twice the time of the cave, it is not difficult to see that the cultivation qualification of the 4 people is really good, and they can indeed be called geniuses. Hearing Gu Shangjuan's inquiry, Yi Tian said truthfully, for Taoist friends, this is a place called the Spirit Realm of Rose.
After leaving the Holy Spirit Realm, we came here. Right away, we will cross the space channel and enter the next Spirit Realm. But this Spirit Realm is extremely unstable and on the verge of collapse. Once a friar of Yuanying territory enters the space channel, it is likely to cause the channel to collapse. The disciples of the Maitreya palace outside are doing some crossing space for the preparation of the channel. Yi came in to see if all Taoist friends have entered Yuanying territory.
Taoist Yi is really joking. The 4 sisters have just reached the peak of the golden elixir realm. I'm afraid it will take a lot of time to enter Yuanying realm.
How can they break through again so soon?
Gu Shangjuan said with a smile.
Yi Tian patted his forehead and said, "Oh.
By the way, your magic weapon cave is twice the time field, not 5 times.
No wonder your entry will be so slow. 5 times the time field?"
Gu Shangjuan and the other 3 female practitioners were stunned at the speech.
At this time, Yi Tian waved his hand, "Don't talk about these useless topics. Yi came in to have a look at this matter.
Since it is impossible to break through in the short term, there is no need to take measures and you can safely pass through the space channel."
Yi is leaving now. All Taoist friends can practice at ease. Yi Daoyu, please stay. A beautiful nun hurriedly called Yi Tian. Taoist friend Lin, is there anything else?
Yi Tian remembers that this woman's name is Lin Qi, who is the daughter of the master of the Lin family in the time and spiritual region.
If Yi Daoyu doesn't enter the space channel immediately, can we let our sisters breathe outside? This opportunity is rare. I really don't know when to wait until Yi Daoyu comes next time.
Lin Qi said with a smile.
Yi Tianlu pondered, such a small thing is naturally no problem, but we can't stay away from the cave. Maybe we have to start at any time. Naturally, everything follows Yi Daoyu's arrangement. Lin Qi's face brightened when she heard Yi Tian's answer. Yi Tian said no more and walked outside the cave. Gu Xiangjuan and Lin Qi went out with the other two nuns.
Outside the magic weapon cave, the four nuns were surprised when they saw countless magic weapon caves and countless monks around.
Yi Daoyu, these are the disciples of the Maitreya Palace? Gu Xiangjuan asked in surprise when Yi Tian didn't go far and caught up with the first few steps.
Naturally, only you four monks here are not disciples of the palace, and the rest are people of the Maitreya Palace.
Yi Tian said with a smile. Taoist Yi is really the lord of the Maitreya Palace? Gu Xiangjuan's eyes swept over some monks and asked suspiciously.
Yi Tian asked with a positive look, I don't know why Gu Daoyu asked like this.
Do you think what Yi said before is deceiving you, or that Yi is pretending to be the leader of the Maitreya Palace?
No.
Lord Yi misunderstood. I mean, those friars in Huashan realm should be the elders of the supreme elders of the Maitreya Palace?
Gu Xiangjuan knew he was speechless and hurried to explain, but she didn't feel very suitable, but she couldn't manage so much.
Ah.
It turns out that Taoist friend Gu is for this reason. Some of the monks who transformed the divine realm are Ye's disciples and some are under Ye's disciples.
How many of their disciples are still the patriarchs and leaders of some sections?
The Maitreya Palace was created by Yi and is not inherited from ancient times. There are no supreme elders at all.
Yi Tian suddenly explained again. Ah.
Gu Xiangjuan and Lin Qi stayed there without exception. Yi Tian has a thing about turning old slaves in the divine realm.
These four female nuns all know that they only think that Yi Tian has a strong background and the so-called old slaves are old people of the previous generation.
Although some people have a high level, they are excusable to be slaves and servants for some reason. However, it is not so hasty to worship the master. It is impossible for high-level friars to worship low-level friars. Apart from the friars of high rank, the friars of different realms, who had nothing to do with each other, can match those of high realm with those of low realm as Taoist friends.
Such pure relationship is already very open-minded. As for apprenticeship? It's impossible, never. However, Yi Tian said so now. Is it true or false? Why don't you trust him?
The four nuns had different thoughts, and they couldn't help thinking of finding someone to inquire about. At this time, Situ Juanru suddenly flashed and came to Yi Tian. Master, the treasure clothes have been arranged for the disciples to take off, and the stones have been arranged.
Wait for departure at any time.
Situ Juanru had just finished. Morong Chanxian and Liao Tungwen also flew over. Master, the disciples have finished the layout, and then listened to Master's orders.
Master, so are the disciples. The layout is over.
Hearing the report from the two men, Yi Tian nodded slightly, glanced at the distance and said, check again to ensure that all magic weapons, caves and spirit beast rings are checked in place in case of loss. Now the Royal Beast Division and Xian Law Enforcement Envoy have not finished.
After checking properly, wait in place. Yes, Master. The three disciples of Huashan realm immediately bowed down.
They had shot away from the original place and continued to arrange according to Yi Tian's instructions. For Taoist friends, please help yourself. Yi also needs to make some preparations, so I won't accompany you much.
When you return to the cave later, Yi will take you away.
At this time, Yi Tian turned back and looked at the four women of Gu Xiangjuan who were stunned. After that, regardless of their reaction, he left here directly. He also had some spirit beast rings, because he was the owner of the spirit beast ring. He could only put Huafan stones in it himself.
Taoist Yi is really amazing. So many friars in the realm of God worship him as a teacher. They must have something extraordinary. Lin Chi murmured, looking at Yi Tianyuan's back. This is natural. You don't think about it. Yi Daoyu first brought the dead back to life, and then used magical means to refine pills to restore our memory. By these means, which monk in the golden elixir realm can do it, even the monk in the spirit realm can't do it. Gu Shangjuan's eyes followed Yi Tian's figure and said, I believe the three sisters must clearly remember that in the holy demon realm, Yi Daoyu's cultivation realm is only the early cultivation realm of the golden elixir realm. Now, our sisters have only broken through one small realm, while Yi Daoyu has broken through two small realms. You know, we have always been meditating and cultivating in the magic weapon cave, and Yi Daoyu has a variety of affairs and crosses different spiritual realms, no matter what it is said that the cultivation time is not as much as ours. That can only explain one problem. The 5 times time field mentioned by Yi Daoyu is really true. Do you know what this means? We're not stupid. Don't you know what it means? A female nun named Du Shuechuan brightened her eyes and answered. I think we have to think about some things. If all the monks in Huashan realm worship Taoist Yi as their teachers, you don't have any ideas? Gu Shangjuan said here and looked at the other 3 female monks with meaningful eyes. Let's go back to the magic weapon cave and have a good discussion. Gu Shangjuan continued when he saw the 3 people frowning and thinking. Well, if we follow Yi Daoyu like this, it's time to discuss the next step. After all, Yi Daoyu said that all the disciples here are from the Maitreya palace except the 4 of us. Lin Chi said softly. With that, the 4 nuns looked at the continuous magic weapon cave and many disciples of the Maitreya palace, and turned to enter the cave. More than 2 hours later, Morong Qianqian and others have repeatedly checked several times to ensure that they have achieved the degree of no omission as Yi Tian said, and the disciples of Shenrun and the Beast Control Division have also handled all the Spirit Beast rings. Those who should enter the magic weapon cave have entered the magic weapon cave and have been collected one by one. The continuous scenery of the original magic weapon cave no longer exists, leaving only Yi Tian, Morong Qianqian, Liao Tongguan and Situ Juanru. Come in. Yi Tian glanced at several people, released a magic weapon cave that had been arranged to turn ordinary stones, and said, this time, being a teacher is still going through the space channel alone. Your realm is too high, so? We believe in Master's Taoism, so? We'll go in now, Situ Juanru said with a smile and entered the cave. Morong Qianqian and Liao Tongguan also followed in. They all knew that it was the only choice for Master to take them through the space channel leading to Guanghan spiritual region. Seeing the crowd disappear in sight, Yi Tian gestured and collected the magic weapon cave into Shumi Ring. Then he moved, turned, and flew to the peak. The next moment, all the Wuhuan puppets were included in Zumaji by him. These Wuhuan puppets have no mana fluctuation and will not have any impact on the space channel. Naturally, the treasure clothes need not be removed. When everything was ready, Yi Tian took out an empty magic weapon cave again, held it in his hand, took a deep look at the gray space channel with a rumbling sound, and then jumped into it. In the gray space channel, Yi Tian immediately sensed the surging force of countless spaces around him. The direction was messy and irregular. It seemed continuous, but it was not so terrible. The more so, Yi Tian feels a little dangerous, because only in the extremely disordered space channel can this space force restrain each other and offset each other. This shows that the space channel has been unstable to a certain extent, and the rumbling sound is the sound made by the collision of space forces. With the power of such space, Yi Tian is confident that he can easily pass through with his strong flesh, not to mention that he is also wearing a treasure coat refined by the cold region Tianchan. In addition to the treasure coat, he also wears a layer of divine dragon armor. But in order to be cautious, he released the magic weapon in his hand, and then he flashed into it. The whole magic weapon cave flies forward slowly in the soft force of space, and occasionally shakes due to the influence of the force of space. In addition, it is always extremely stable. It can be said that it is the most stable space passage he has crossed. In the magic weapon cave, Yi Tianyuan looked out of the cave. Through the gray fog, he saw the mottled and cracked barriers around the space channel, as if the space channel would collapse as long as a storm hit. This situation is extremely dangerous.
Fortunately, all high-level friars have been turned into ordinary stones to eliminate the leakage of mana, and did not cause any fluctuation of space power. In the attraction of the power of space, the magic weapon cave flew forward along the space channel. At the beginning, the speed was not fast. With the continuous deepening, the attraction became stronger and stronger, and the speed of the magic weapon cave became faster and faster. At a certain moment, the speed of the fast-moving magic weapon cave suddenly slowed down and began to decline continuously.
Through the magic weapon cave, Yuan Tianyan's vision is no longer the gray space fog of the previous one.
The light suddenly shines, and a new picture appears in front of Yi Tian.
Guanhan Lingyu.
Completely different from his own pictograph, the scene in front of him is not as prosperous as expected, not full of green and full of vitality. On the contrary, there are bare stones everywhere.
There are no plants or green at all.
It seems that this is a place of death. In short, at the first glance, Yi Tian didn't find any signs of life. A magic power hit the magic weapon cave and protected the defense of the cave. The prohibition was closed.
The next moment, Yi Tian moved and appeared outside the magic weapon cave.
In the magic weapon cave, Yuan Tianyan observed that the situation outside was limited by the perspective. As soon as he was outside the world, his body shook uncontrollably, his eyes coagulated suddenly, and the whole person stayed there. Previously, in the magic weapon cave, he only saw the surrounding situation. At this time, he looked up in the low altitude not far from the ground and suddenly found that there was a huge blue planet hanging on the high sky. This situation was not seen when he arrived in any spiritual realm.
Earth star. This is Earth star. Looking at the blue planet, Yi Tian was excited. He couldn't help muttering.
Finally, he saw the place he wanted to go back in his dream. However, soon his face changed slightly, twitched his nose and sucked a few mouthfuls, and his mind relaxed and shrouded in a range of tens of thousands of miles.
After concentrating for a moment, Yi Tian gestured and took out a magic weapon cave.
With the opening of the ban, Morong Chanshan, Situ Juanru and Liao Tungwen came out.
Shifu. This is Guanhan Lingyu? Morong Chanshan stepped out of the magic weapon cave and asked happily.
Yes, this is the Guanhan spiritual region. Lao 19, look up and see that the huge blue planet above your head is your ancestor. Earth star, which is called the Holy Land among the 10,000 regions of the heavens. The spiritual region is there. Yi Tian gestured again and took out another magic weapon cave, but explained.
Ancestral star. Morong Chanshan looked up at the sky and burst into tears when the blue planet suddenly came into sight. This is where we are going. Liao Tungwen and Situ Juanru also raised their eyes and murmured.
At this time, Xianran also came out of the second magic weapon cave released by Yi Tian.
Yi Tian took another look at the blue planet hanging overhead and said to the people, "Don't you think the smell here is strange?"
Yes, there is indeed a strange breath. It seems that this breath should not be what a spiritual domain should have, and there is no life here.
No, there is life. Xianran responded and let go of his mind.
Then his eyes narrowed and said, "Palace Master, those people are monks of the Almighty Sect.
What are those dark red things? There are so many, it looks boundless."
Up to now, Morong Chanshan, Liao Tungwen and Situ Juanru have also released their gods and observed the people and things mentioned by Xianran. 10,000 miles away, there were 30 or 40 friars. They were familiar with blonde hair and blue eyes, which was completely consistent with the characteristics of local friars in Rose's spirit realm. The monks were meditating with their eyes closed on a bare stone without any change. They didn't seem to find the situation here. Hundreds of miles away from the monks, the dark red object mentioned in Xianran's mouth is like magma, but it is not as bright red as magma, but more black. It seems that those black and red things are the main body in the whole cold spirit domain. They look boundless and all over the eyes, extending to the end covered by God.
What are those?
It seems that this strange smell is from those things. Situ Juanru felt the boundless black and red magma, frowned slightly and said, but he didn't care about the monks from the Almighty Sect of the Rose Spirit region. That strange smell gives people a very uncomfortable feeling, full of death, and people can't help but subconsciously want to avoid it.
If you don't know what it is, let me tell you. Yi Tian took back his mind, breathed out a long breath and said, "That kind of thing is robbing embers?" "Robbing embers?" Morong Chanqian repeated blankly and asked, "Master, what is robbing embers?" Yi Tian glanced at the people in front of him and saw that they all looked confused. Obviously, they had never touched or heard of robbing embers, so he introduced them in detail. It is said that the looting embers are a strange substance left after the collapse and combustion when an era is coming to the end and about to be destroyed. Although the current looting embers seem to be semi-solid and semi-liquid, once solidified, the looting embers will show a dark color. This kind of looting ember will emit a terrible looting breath. If you come into close contact with these looting breath, you will be infected with this looting breath, so that your vitality will disappear, your cultivation will decline, and finally be destroyed by this terrible breath. Don't say it's a monk, it's some genius earth treasures. Even the most precious divine gold will dissipate and become the most common thing because it is contaminated with the smell of robbery and destruction. What about us? When Yi Tian said this, Liao Tungwen couldn't help looking at Yi Tian. "Master, since robbing embers is so terrible, what about us?" Yi Tian smiled and said, "It doesn't hurt to be so far away. The monks of the Almighty sect are hundreds of miles away from the looting embers, and they are also not affected much. But if they are too close, for example, within tens of feet, they will be affected by the looting embers. However, after the ashes are hardened, they are the top refining material, the hardest thing in time, and have destructive power. As a teacher, I have seen a flying needle refined from ashes. It is very spiritual, but I don't know who made it. And the place where the burning needle appeared is on the Earth Star." "So, there are also robbing embers on the Earth Star?" Morong Chanqian asked with horror. It's easy to guess that all of them don't know about robbing embers, and Master knows exactly and in such detail. There are flying needles refined by robbing embers on the Earth Star, and she naturally thought of this problem. Yi Tian nodded slightly at the speech and said, "Yes, old 19, you react quickly. There is indeed Jiajin on the ancestral star, and the root cause of the destruction of a great world on the ancestral star is probably the emergence of Jiajin. It is also because Jiajin, the vitality of the ancestral star is withered, the spirit is thin, and the cultivation resources are short that there are no real monks on the ancestral star for countless years. You may not believe that a few years ago, the friars on the 5th and 6th floors of the cave on the ancestral star could be called the top power of the Earth Star. How could you reach such a level? But, in that case, Master, how did you practice to the present level?" Morong Chanqian was stunned and asked with doubts. Of course, being a teacher is a special existence, and now the ancestral star's Reiki recovery is no longer the same as before. But for the ancestral star, the Reiki recovery may not be a good thing, because with the Reiki recovery, changes have taken place in the demon world and the underworld, and even friars in other spiritual regions have set foot on the Earth Star to try to find the so-called fairy machine. Yi Tian looked at the blue planet overhead and said faintly. At this time, Situ Juanru said in a deep voice, "Shifu, since this kind of looting embers is the best material for refining utensils, can you find a way to eliminate the influence of the smell of looting embers on friars? If you can do this, the disciple wants to have a good study and use the looting embers to refine the top magic weapons. In this way, the strength of the Maitreya Palace will certainly increase greatly. If you face the powerful enemy in time, you will have another winning card." After Situ Juanru finished, Yi Tian smiled, "Old 17, you're very good. When you hear about such terrible things as robbing embers, you don't think about how to avoid them, but how to make good use of them. I can tell you that the magic weapon refined by robbing embers is definitely more terrible than you think, but it must be more difficult to refine than you think. This so-called hardest treasure in the era of extinction is not easy to refine. It's the smell of robbing and destroying in the is that those great friars in Yupu territory also avoid like snakes and scorpions. Once they are infected, the light ones may stop their lifelong cultivation and have to use their cultivation to suppress the smell of robbing and destroying every day. The heavy ones are likely to disappear and return to the dust. It's not easy for me to call you out as a teacher to let you know more. Although this kind of thing is terrible, it can be used well, but it can become a powerful card for us. It is only used by our Maitreya Palace. If I am contaminated with the smell of destruction, I can eliminate it. You can rest assured. But it's not enough to eliminate it after being contaminated after all,
it takes a process to eliminate the smell of robbery and destruction, and the materials needed are very special and precious. Although there are a lot of quantities here, it is impossible to consume endlessly. Now, what I want to test is whether the treasure clothes refined by Xianin stone can eliminate the influence of robbing breath. If the treasure clothes have this function, the terrible robbing embers will no longer be terrible to us. We can use these robbing embers to do a lot of things in the future. Situjuanru could not help but brighten his eyes when he heard the speech. He immediately bowed his hands and said, "Master, I'd like to have a try." As he spoke, he motioned, took out a treasure coat and put it on him. With a slight urging of mana, the treasure coat immediately melted into his body and disappeared. Tian stretched out his hand and said, "This matter is arranged by the teacher. Follow me first." After that, Tian motioned and summoned the 6th order golden eye god carving, stepped on the back of the god carving and flew away. Without saying a word, Situjuanru and others released their flying swords and followed the golden eye god carving. The direction the party went was exactly where the disciples of Almighty Sect were. They were so fast that they were more than 3,000 miles away from each other. At this time, under the cover of God, Tian found that the monks of the Almighty Sect suddenly stood up from sitting cross-legged and looked at themselves. Then the other party all left the ground, rose in the air and flew in the direction of robbing the embers. Oh, I admire their spirit of returning to death. They really made a lot of sacrifices and painstaking efforts to lure us into the ashes on the back of the divine eagle. Tian smiled and said that this suicidal method of luring the enemy may be useful to others, but it is really superfluous to him. When Tian was in the great wilderness spirit realm, he was already ready to deal with the looting embers on the earth, and brought back a large number of stones that can generate looting water from there. What Shifu said is very true. These golden friars are worried that we won't enter the space channel. It's really painstaking to leave a message on the boulder. Morong Chanxian shook his head and said, "This imminent method is not necessarily invalid, but for whom?" Tian said with a smile, "In my opinion, what they do now is only a last resort, which is a desperate mace. Their biggest reliance is the space channel close to the edge of collapse. As long as we suddenly have a high-level monk or monster entering the space channel, there will be space collapse, which is really something that will kill people." Tian said with a radiance on his lips. At this time, they and their party had come to the place where dozens of almighty local friars had previously stayed. The golden eye divine eagle slowed down and stopped. The people behind him did not know why, so they all stopped their bodies one after another. "Shifu, don't go after those people?" Morong Chanxian asked puzzled. "It's impossible to let them go, but it's not like this. They have gone deep into the burning embers. Even if they don't pursue them, they will return to the burning embers again. If they really have the ability to stay in the burning embers for a long time without causing any impact, I really need to study them as a teacher." Tian waved his hand and said. Then he looked at the others and said, "This distance belongs to a safe distance. Even low-level friars will not be affected. Please release all the disciples and let them see the looting embers. In the future, many disciples will deal with this terrible thing. Even if the treasure clothes refined by Xianin stone can't defend against the looting embers, teachers also need to use these looting embers." "I see." Seeing Tian's solemn words, all the disciples knew that it was important and immediately promised to take action. One after another, the magic treasures were taken out, and the monks in the realm of transforming gods came out. Then they took out the magic treasures on their bodies, layer by layer, and disciples came out of the magic treasures one after another. The same is true for Tian and Xianrun. They took out their magic weapons, the cave, and put the disciples together. Due to the large number of people and large area, it took almost half an hour for many disciples to gather. The disciples of Tiangong branch and Taisho branch in alchemy and magic weapon refining did not come out, which was similar to those who had tasks, and basically did not participate in various activities. Under the leadership of Morong Chuchu, the field division constantly arranges the time field, which is also not among these people. Many disciples stand in two camps, one is the official disciple of the Maitreya Palace, and the other is the sergeant of the Sacred Wind Army. Those friars who have not had the opportunity to join the Maitreya Palace. The two camps are silent. Although many people are very curious about the strange environment, no one dares to whisper. Tian slowly floated up, placed himself in the void, and looked down at the friars of the two camps below with an absolute height. His eyes slowly flashed from the camp. This kind of eyes made each friar have an illusion, as if Tian's eyes saw everyone and were paying attention to everyone. He was in the sight of the palace master Tian. Every time such a gathering takes place, with the eyes of the palace master, there will be some major events. As for what happens, everyone secretly guesses in their hearts, but they always don't know the point, because at present, they seem to be the only people in the world, and there are no strong enemies. At this time, Tian glanced at many disciples and said slowly, all the disciples of the Maitreya palace have successfully left the Rose spiritual realm and arrived at the Guanghan spiritual realm. Look up and see that this huge blue planet is our final destination. It is called the Holy Spiritual Realm by the spiritual realm. It is the ancestor star in the mouth of the disciples of the Shueiyue sect. We are used to calling it Earth Star or Earth. The disciples of the two camps are listening carefully. They all know that this is just a simple opening speech. Sure enough, the people heard Tian continue to say, in this cold spiritual region, the Maitreya palace will recruit a group of formal disciples from the sergeants of the Sacred Wind Army again. As soon as he said this, there was a cheering in the kamikaze army. Tian pressed his hands falsely and stopped everyone's agitation. However, the recruitment conditions this time are some dangerous. You can make a decision after considering.